On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 10.
Good morning. Liz Truss has pledged to immediately reverse the rise in national insurance contributions if she becomes Prime Minister. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, the Tory leadership candidate has pledged to bring in an emergency budget to grow the economy. Her supporter and former leadership hopeful Penny Mordaunt told Talk TV the plans were needed.
Tax cuts don't have to be inflationary. She's got her programme of tax cuts, which is using the headroom that is there at the moment, but also because we're dealing with not just the issue of inflation, but also weak demand in the economy, we don't necessarily are going to have inflation as a consequence of those tax cuts.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak wants to introduce another multi-billion-pound package to help families struggling with the rising cost of living. The former Chancellor says his Tory leadership rival Liz Truss was wrong to rule out further direct support for households this winter. And his supporter Robert Halfon told us that wasn't good enough.
There will need to be a package, a significant package of targeted support. And that is the key, targeted support to help those who are struggling. The problem with Liz Truss's proposal is she's spending all that money now, reversing tax cuts for big business. It's only big business that are going to get the corporation tax. And that means what happens later on.
Thames Valley Police have confirmed an 11-year-old girl who went missing at a water park near Windsor in Berkshire has died. Emergency services were called yesterday afternoon to reports of a child getting into difficulty at the Liquid Leisure Park near Datchet. The United Nations has warned of nuclear disaster if Russia continues its shelling at a large power plant in Ukraine. But the Kremlin has blamed Ukraine for the rocket and artillery fire at the plant in Zaporizhzhia, saying it's lucky no radiation has leaked so far. The US has hit out at China, calling its military drills in Taiwanese territory provocative and irresponsible. Taiwan's defense ministry confirmed that more exercises were carried out this morning, with aircraft and ships being dispatched in reaction to the threat. And the UK is set to see another heat wave next week, with temperatures projected to reach the mid-30s. It comes as water companies are under pressure from Environment Secretary George Eustice to enforce hosepipe bans during the prolonged dry weather. That's the latest for now. It's time for today's weather.
Times World News sponsors Talk TV Weather.
It will be a dry and sunny morning across much of England and Wales. However, parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland will see some rain accompanied by a brisk wind. As we move into lunchtime, the outbreaks of rain will continue across parts of Scotland. Eastern Scotland, though, should see some lengthy, dry and bright spells develop thanks to the shelter from the mountains. The north coast of Northern Ireland may also see some rain, along with Cumbria and Northumberland. Elsewhere across the rest of England and Wales, it will be another dry and sunny day with just a little bit of fair weather cloud developing. It will be feeling warmer than it did on Saturday, with temperatures already climbing into the low 20s by lunchtime. Temperatures in the south should peak around 28 Celsius.
Times World News sponsors Talk TV Weather.
Why do you think shouting loudly throughout their interviews is doing any service to people?
99% of the time, I'm actually stood silent.
Liar!
After
Liar!
Not
Liar! Liar!
You can shout as much as you like.
That's the point, Steve.
And a very good morning to one and all. Yes, it's just after 10 o'clock. It's Sunday the 7th of August, and this is Tice Talk. It's also, I'm feeling quite chuffed, it's my first anniversary of presenting here at Talk TV. I'm still here. Long may that hopefully continue. And goodness me, what a year it's been. It feels like it's been a year of constant crisis. When I started, the Afghanistan evacuation crisis was just erupting. We've had the crisis in Ukraine, we've had the energy crisis, the cost of living crisis, and of course, ongoing is the Channel migrant crisis, and that's going to be a big theme of my show today, because yes, I broke the story with the official government document that's on the front page of today's Mail on Sunday. That actually, it turns out that the largest group of migrants coming across the Channel, they're not from war-torn countries, they're not fleeing terror or persecution, no. They're coming from, 4 in 10 are coming from Albania. So we'll be talking about that exclusive story in the first hour with experts and asking the question, why are they coming from a peaceful country that's a member of NATO and is close to joining the European Union? What's really going on when you could come here lawfully with a visa and work here? So we'll be looking at that. We'll be looking at the growth of the Albanian drugs trade here in the UK. That's what really concerns me, and we've got to be brave enough to talk about it. In the second hour, we've got to be looking at this NHS cyber hack. What's really going on there? Is that a sort of a highlight of what's to come? We'll be talking about the economy, and also it's time for Talk Gear. Yes, this month, once a month, I get Howard Cox of Fairfield UK. He'll be in with some more shocking data about the racketeering going on in the fuel market. And then in the third hour, we'll have a specialist security and justice expert from the capital, Tirana, of Albania, to talk about the rise in illegality, criminality and drugs in Albania and what's really going on. But also, in my section on climate sanity, good news, folks. Yes, we can smile, because the wonderful, the amazing Great Barrier Reef is recovering to record levels. Did you read about that in the press? Thought not. Wonder why. So much to talk about, so much to be getting on with. Amazing guests, MPs, experts from Australia and Albania and beyond. And my question to you is, do you trust Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak to deal with the migrant crisis? Call me 0344 499 1000, you know the number, or, of course, text 87222 using the word talk. Send us a tweet at Talk TV, because the show works better when you share your frustrations, your joys, your anxieties. I may not be able to cure them all, but we will be able to chat about them and discuss them. So much going on. Stay with us for the whole show. You're listening to Tice Talk. It is Talk TV. Well, yes, the organ music confirms it is that time. It's time for my Sunday sermon this morning. And I obviously want to talk about the story that I broke with the Mail on Sunday, based on the official government document that I've seen, that for the first time actually exposes the truth about what's going on with the Channel migrant crisis in significant detail. Now, the thing is, I think many of us, we've had that gut instinct. You know what it's like? You've got a strong gut instinct, but you can't quite prove it. And you know something's not right. Well, this is it, folks. I found the proof. I found the evidence. And our gut instinct was right. We have been misled. We have been, I believe, we've been lied to. We haven't been told the truth. And the British people, we don't appreciate that. We don't appreciate being kept in the dark by the government and treated as fools by human rights lawyers who say that all of the migrants are fleeing war and persecution and terror. And I have to ask, so why hasn't the government given us the breakdown of country of origin of the illegal migrants, when it turns out they have this data within days of their arrivals? This document I saw is just for a 6-week period this summer, and it breaks it down in huge details. Why have the human rights lawyers pretended all this time that they're all genuine asylum seekers, when now we know 4 in 10 are coming from peaceful Albania? There hasn't been a war there for 25 years, folks. The truth is really, really shocking. It's not at year. Not only is it not at war, but actually the Albanian economy is growing much faster than ours. Their inflation and debt figures are better than ours, albeit, of course, from poorer levels. The World Bank is complimentary about the progress Albania is making, and per head, per capita, Albania's GDP is twice that of Ukraine. People go on holiday to Albania. And if you're an Albanian, you can apply quite simply for a visa to come here to the UK for 180 days. You can work on what's called the Seasonal Agricultural Workers Scheme, which is available to help pick fruit and horticulture. You can work in poultry, for example. So if there's so many ways to come here lawfully and cheaply, much cheaper than the cost of illegally and very dangerously crossing the channel, you have to ask yourself that simple question. Why would you pay thousands of euros to come here illegally if you can pay a few €100 to come here lawfully? Does that raise a question in your mind? It certainly does in mine. Other interesting information in the document that I've seen. More migrants are coming from Turkey, also trying to join the EU, Vietnam and Egypt, than are coming from the war zones of Syria and Yemen. Just 6%, just under 6%, are coming from Syria, under 13% now from Afghanistan. And I think these figures raise serious questions, really serious questions. Now, I'm sure there are the vast majority of Albanians are lovely people. It's a tourist destination, as I say, and I've got nothing against that vast majority of lovely Albanians. But we have to ask that difficult, that uncomfortable, searching question about what's going on. Is it a coincidence that Albania now represents the largest group of foreign nationals in our prisons, at some 1,500 prisoners, almost double that of any other foreign nation? 10% of all foreign nationals in our prisons today are Albanian. Now, give or take, there's about 47,000 Albanians in the UK. What that means is, as a proportion of the population, it is 30 times more likely that an Albanian will be in prison than the average UK citizen. 30 times more likely. I repeat that the vast majority of Albanians will be delightful, law-abiding people. But there is a major issue here, and we have to be honest and talk about it. In July 2012, there were just 180 Albanians in our prisons. And there was a deal agreed with the Conservative government that 100 of them would be sent back to serve their time in Albania. Last year, with great aplomb, there was another deal agreed in July last year between the Home Office and Albania that the majority of the 1,500 prisoners in our prisons would be sent back to serve their term in Albania. July last year. By February this year, some 6 or 7 months later, just guess how many had been returned, folks? 1,200? 1,000? 500? 100? Surely not below 100. Surely not. 24. 24 out of 1,500. A sign of more utter, woeful incompetence by our Home Office that is simply not fit for purpose. Is it a coincidence that Albanian gangs are the most notorious who've taken almost complete control of the cannabis and cocaine market in the UK? And that's according to our own National Crime Agency. Is it possible that actually many of these Albanians coming across the channel are in fact foot soldiers for these criminal gangs to replace those locked up? Or are they to be trapped in modern-day slavery in some of the hundreds of Albanian-run car washes, Albanian-owned car washes, owned by the criminal gangs, as a way to launder money? I'll be exploring that with my guest this show, because we need answers. We need them now. That is the reality. I repeat, I've nothing against the majority of delightful Albanians, but we have to ask these difficult, searching, uncomfortable questions, and we want answers, because it's costing us billions of pounds, and I've proven the evidence, the factual evidence, up-to-date knowledge, that we are being misled, we're not being told the truth, and it is unacceptable. The government knows within days where these illegal migrants come from. The military know exactly when they're setting off and from exactly which departure point. So why are the French not dealing with that? The military even know exactly which manufacturers in China are manufacturing the boats. The document that I've seen shows that actually cooperation from the French is disappointing. We've given them tens and tens and tens of millions of pounds, and the response is disappointing. Well, I've got a simple 3-point plan for the winner of this leadership contest. First, the origin of the migrants should now be published monthly because they've got the data. Why hide it? Unless it's too embarrassing. Publish the data monthly so that we know the truth and that we're not being misled. Secondly, the UK military should be giving the locations of these launch points immediately to the French police, and these should also be published on the basis that they've got the information, and guess what? Information is power. And thirdly, in my view, and I'll be talking about this after the break with Stephen Wolfe, the border force must stop accepting migrants from the French Navy at the halfway point, but instead I think we need a new policy. Pick up and take back for all the migrants, returning them to France under existing, perfectly reasonable, existing laws from 1974, what's called the Safety of Life at Sea laws. This would stop this vile, dangerous, racketeering trade of human suffering, of human trafficking, of human smuggling. It would restore the confidence of the British people that we've taken back control of our borders. And it should happen now, not on the 5th of September or later. That's my question. Do you trust either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak to sort this out? That's my question. We deserve the truth. And here endeth the Sunday sermon. Welcome back, my friends, and I think it's fair to say that people are engaged and not very happy. The tweets are pouring in, lots of calls coming in. Quick one here. Richard, is money laundering not a direct entry for Albania to the EU? The Home Office is run by old fogies, senior civil servant dinosaurs who can't leave. And then another one here from Bill, who says, I don't understand why Pretty hasn't released these figures because they support the case for dealing with the immigration issue. Well done on your research. Thank good someone's finding out the truth. And that's the point, isn't it? They've got all this data, but surprise, surprise, they didn't release it. Well, I'm delighted to be joined now in the studio by Stephen Wolfe, Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Stephen, a very good morning to you. Morning, so, I mean, you've been following this issue of lawful migration and illegal migration for a long time now.
Yes.
This data is the first time it's been published. It's just very current, covering 6 weeks this summer. And yet the government's had this data. How shocked are you by what's been revealed?
I'm absolutely horrified by these numbers, and I think we should be privileged to know that you've got hold of them, because I've requested numerous freedom of information requests over the past year and a half for more intricate information over the Channel migrants, and it's consistently refused. So the fact you've got over this is something that the Home Office will not like, the government will not like, because it again shows that over 40%, as you're looking at, of Albanians are coming over. They're not fleeing war-torn countries, as we're told, and it shows that the immigration system, and particularly asylum, is failing in front of our own eyes.
Because here we've got this data, 4 in 10 from Albania, and yet, you know, we're constantly told that between 60 and 70% of all those who apply for asylum are granted it on the basis that they are asylum seekers. So there's clearly incompetence at the Home Office. I mean, many of the other countries identified of origin on this document are, again, from places like Turkey, joining the EU, India, hardly a place of war and persecution. You know, it just feels to me that there's utter incompetence.
And it's not surprising. The research that we're showing just on asylum, which we'll publish in September, if you look at the Albanians, the numbers of Albanians that come over have doubled since 2017. They're averaging around 3,000 to 4,000, but on your numbers, that could go up to 5,000, 6,000 this year. Quite astonishing. Huge failure on our own government, huge failure on those tracking those coming from Albania. We've got a system that doesn't seem to be working.
So we've got, you know, the growth in the numbers from Albania, which seems completely contrary to the progress Albania is making as a nation, as a member of NATO, moving towards membership of the European Union, economy growing, albeit from, you know, from a low level. You can come here by visa. So it raises serious questions about what's going on. Should this now change the government's response?
I think you're right. It's going to force them to address the issue. By highlighting what you've done today is going to change the overall message, and I think future research that will come out will change that too, because it's not just 60%, as you say, of people fleeing war-torn countries. Those numbers will be skewed. And what will be more interesting, Richard, is to see how many of these Albanians have actually been granted asylum, and on what basis. And what does the Albanian government think of all these citizens fleeing their so-called terrorised country through fear?
Well, exactly, and I think the truth is that's why there's the big question, which is, you know, why are they coming through an illegal route, which is more expensive than coming through a lawful route? And that's what, you know, really concerns me. I'm going to be talking to various experts through the show on this. But I wanted to touch base with you also, Stephen, on, you've spoken about this before, in fact, it was you that put me onto it. There's the existing 1974 safety of life at sea laws.
Yes.
And it feels to me that actually the government could use that to safely pick up migrants from these boats and take them back to where they came from. But the government's consistently choosing not to use that.
Yes. There was a Home Affairs Select Committee in which evidence was taken from senior barristers and experts from academia who analysed the SOLAS, as you've called it, the rules that said whether you can turn them back. And it was very clear to the committee, and therefore the government, that you can turn back these boats as they leave France. So you have to ask yourself why. It must be because, A, the Foreign Office or those in government refused to accept the international incident that this would occur, because France is not accepting this as a principle. My view is that any sensible government would start to return them to France and challenge them in the courts, whether it be in the UK or France, so that this is cleared up, and to ensure that our military, or in this term the Navy, return them because they know that they can do so safely.
So that's the point, isn't it? That actually, at the moment, our government is too scared to take this matter to the international courts to test it with the French to get some clarity on this point. And in a sense, that's what's got to be done, in my view, that we've got to say, actually, we can return them under SOLAS, we should do so, and if you in France don't agree, then please sue us in the international courts.
We have Conservative MPs like Priti Patel, Kemi Badenoch, Suella Braverman and others who are willing to take the tough decisions to return these migrants back to France. But they're being prevented, and so they're going to be prevented by some members of their own party, but more importantly, I suspect they're being prevented by civil servants and government lawyers who are going to be arguing that it will create an international incident and we don't want to do this. Who's in charge here? The government lawyers or the civil servants, or the politicians who have the will of the people behind them demanding that they do this? And I do hope that whoever becomes the new Conservative Prime Minister takes this on board and starts to challenge these foreign entities and countries refusing to accept the will.
Well, that's my big question for listeners and viewers today, is do you trust either of the two Tory leadership candidates to be the next Prime Minister, whether it's Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss? Do you trust that they will get on top of this this crisis? Do you think that this new expose will give them extra confidence, extra strength? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. I want your views on that. You might be a Conservative member. They've talked about using the Rwanda scheme, but I want to know, do you really believe that they will actually do something, or will they just carry on talking the talk, not walking the walk? And finally, Stephen, the growth in numbers. We've also had this report recently about the number of the illegal migrants who are absconding from their accommodation, from the hostel or hotel accommodation. Hundreds and hundreds that we know about have literally just disappeared, so the number's probably likely to be higher. Do you think that actually there's the real risk that there's a link between those and potentially what I think is these foot soldiers, potential foot soldiers for the Albanian gangs?
I think that's got to be a link, because not only are we seeing the numbers absconding, we're seeing the numbers of Albanians in our prisons rising too, and I think you've got the numbers of those to show how many of those are actually becoming a major, if not the largest group of foreign criminals in our own prison system, and how we're not deporting them too. It's very clear that we're not deporting many Albanians back to their country, despite the fact that we also have an agreement in place that enables us to do so. So if they're absconding, where are they going? We're seeing prison rising. Is there a link? And I think any sensible person would start to think there is a correlation between those not reporting themselves and those entering the criminal system.
So that's great, Stephen. Thank you very much for that. Now, on the other side, we've had a tweet, and it's good to review the world. Diana Harding, I wonder if that's the Diana Harding, it said, Talk TV bashing the Home Office as usual, whilst accepting that their record on deportation isn't brilliant. Why are you only quoting figures to February when later figures are available? Since March 21, over 10,000 have been deported. Well, what I'm saying is specifically here on the Albanian figures, a deal was agreed last summer. We've got 1,500 in our prisons, only 24 have been deported, and that's to the latest figure that I've seen available to February. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000, with your thoughts, your views. A massive thank you to Stephen Wolfe. He will stay with us in the studio to answer to any questions that you may have got. Keep those tweets and calls coming in. Later in this hour, we'll be talking to John Lucas as well, a author of a book, Albanian Mafia Wars. He'll have something to say about this issue. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the home of common sense. It's Tice Talk.
I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is Talk TV. I think my most memorable and proudest moment in journalism over all these years is actually being on air during the lockdowns, even when I had COVID myself. Over the last 2 years, getting people to tell their stories, not just about people who lost loved ones to COVID, but people who lost their fundamental freedoms, their children's schooling, their mental health, their physical health, their businesses, and giving people the chance to tell their stories about how it affected them.
This is Talk TV News.
Good morning, I'm Rue Abbas. Liz Truss has pledged to immediately reverse the rise in national insurance contributions if she becomes Prime Minister. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, the Tory leadership candidate has pledged to bring in an emergency budget to grow the economy. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak wants to introduce another multi-billion-pound package to help families struggling with the rising cost of living. The former Chancellor says his Tory leadership rival Liz Truss was wrong to rule out further direct support for households this winter. And his supporter Robert Halfon told us that wasn't good enough.
There will need to be a package, a significant package of targeted support. And that is the key, targeted support to help those who are struggling. The problem with Liz Truss's proposal is she's spending all that money now, reversing tax cuts for big business. It's only big business that are going to get the corporation tax. And that means what happens later on.
It says a report commissioned by Gordon Brown warns lower-income families face being up to £1,600 worse off a year. And the former Prime Minister claims current support falls short of what's required. Firefighters in Birmingham are tackling a huge blaze at a factory in the city centre. The West Midlands Fire Service confirmed it has a number of engines on the scene and is urging those living nearby to close their windows due to the large amount of smoke in the area. And the UK is set to see another heat wave next week, with temperatures projected to reach the mid-30s. It comes as water companies are under pressure from Environment Secretary George Eustace to enforce hosepipe bans during the prolonged dry weather. That's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back, my friends. Great to have you on Tice Talk this Sunday morning, when we've been talking this hour about the truth behind the origin of the Channel migrant crisis, and we've got loads and loads of tweets. Stephen Wolfe is here. We're going to go straight to some calls. Thank you very much for Carl, who's congratulated me on my first-year anniversary. We're going to head up to glorious Liverpool, where Tony is on the line. Good morning, Tony. Hi, what's on your mind this morning?
Good morning, Richie. Good morning, Stephen. I think this just confirms what we've always known, which is the government, for political reasons, has held back information away from the public for political expediency. I think we also know that there are several thousand Iranians who've arrived in the UK, and as far as I'm aware, it's not a war-torn country any more than Albania is.
No, I mean, obviously...
As for Albania, Richard, you'll find that it's a tourist hub now for dentistry, dental tourism, and also people having hair treatments, etc. Many Europeans are going to Albania. That's how war-torn that country is.
That's right. Well, they haven't had a war there, mercifully, since for 25 years.
That's right, yeah. The country of Enver Hoxha and people like that, yeah.
That's right. And, they're applying to join the European Union.
I'm concerned, Richard, there's many people in the establishment in this country are more than happy with the status quo, and they always will be, because they don't have to suffer the consequences of not being able to see a GP, not being able to get the kids in a good school. You've got packed trains. The infrastructure in the country is crumbling. But if you live in Notting Hill, Islington, why would you worry about that?
Well, that's right. That's the point, isn't it? And actually, it's even worse than that, Tony, because there are so many vested interests here in the UK that are making millions and millions of profits. The big outsourcing companies, the hotel companies, the lawyers, the charities, they're all doing very nicely out of this trade, so it rather suits them.
Absolutely. If you look at the mills around the northwest of England, etc., places like that, we saw it in Leicester, I think it was last year, 18 months ago, basically, treating people as slaves. And we also know that the Albanian gangs are now the hegemony when it comes to the people trafficking in Europe. It's mainly Albanian gangs involved in that too. But, listen, I'm not supposed to believe my own lying eyes. That's what they tell me.
Yeah, that's right, Tony. Thank you very much for that. Great to chat to you. That was Tony in Liverpool. Lots of messages coming in. One here from Gary who says, you asked why Priti Patel hasn't released the report, but you're assuming she's seen it. Given that Whitehall is packed with woke lefties, there's every chance the civil servants just buried it, as they do with every report that doesn't suit their agenda. Cynical, but probably, quite possibly, Gary is spot on. Who knows? Anyway, we're going to head from Liverpool down to Suffolk, where Pat is on the line. Good morning, Pat.
Good morning, Richard. Yeah, you were talking to that gentleman earlier, and one of the things he said was the civil service. He's dead right. My brother was with the civil service until he died recently. He started off as a loaded programmer and got quite high, sort of one of his management type thing there. And some of the things they got up to in his sort of line, he worked for the MOD on the computers. And, you know, if he didn't want to do something, he didn't have to do it. And the said is the civil service runs the government, unfortunately, as opposed to the government running the civil servants. And dare I say, I suspect a lot of this Boris, Partygate was all civil servants, but nobody was ever admonished for that.
That's right.
Whereas, what happened. But as I said, I don't know if you remember the old Yes Minister.
Oh, absolutely. I'm that old, John. I'm afraid I'm that old. I remember Yes Minister. I think it's true. I think it's spot on.
So close to the knuckle. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
It was actually written by an ex-civil servant, I believe, anyway. But as I said, like the situation, the Rwanda thing, the Civil Service Union are going to contest it in law,
It's incredible, isn't it, that the Civil Service Union are actually... they are part of the groups that are suing the government. It just shouldn't be allowed.
How ridiculous is that,
It's quite ridiculous, Pat. You are spot on. Thank you very much for your thoughts. Pat there from Suffolk, his concern about the civil service doing things at their own pace. Stephen, I mean, we hear that so often, don't we, about the civil service, that, they don't really do what the ministers actually want them to do.
We do, and I've spoken to a number of civil servants in the Immigration and Home Office department over the past few years, and I know that within that community there is some who are deeply frustrated about the way that they can't get the message out that they want to do. I mean, to some of them, they're saying that it's very difficult to get the right information that they want, that others within the departments are training them in different ways. And a lot of it is now, when I'm looking at this, seems to be stemming towards some of the senior civil servants, often in other departments, such as the Foreign Office, where we talk about those who don't want them returned to France, and the lawyers. I mean, I'm a lawyer myself. I've been at the bar. I've met many of them. I've grown up with many of them. And they become institutionalised in this completely kind of left-wing pro-asylum application process. And when they become part of the government, when they get into the Navy, when they're representing the organisations that should be preventing the migrants from coming in, they're actually fully supporting them.
Well, let's go from London. We're going to head to France, in Brittany. I bet it's lovely there. Glorious part of the world, Brittany, where John is on the line patiently. Morning, John.
Good morning, Richard. Yes, it's lovely here this morning.
I can imagine. I'm very jealous.
Yes, and I'm certainly not going to get on a boat and come back.
No, quite right. What's on your mind this morning, John?
Well, months and months ago, I have, I don't know which station, but I have phoned up and, had blank faces like I've come from Mars. To me, it's always been obvious that you can take the DNA from these people to see where their origin comes, is, and their biometrics. And surely the EU and Interpol, whoever keeps the records, must have the details on whether these people have been involved with crime in the past.
No, it's a good question. As I understand, but Stephen might clarify, I understand they do take the biometric fingerprints as soon as they arrive.
Yes, they are doing so now.
But John's asked about the DNA.
Yes.
That I don't know.
Yes, they are beginning to start looking at different programmes which include different methods of assessing, for example, the age of those coming in, because as we've now identified, we have thousands of coming in as so-called children, And now, after they've been into the process, we found out that they're not. And so they've had to start looking at things such as teeth and fingerprints and DNA. And yet again, we're going to get the immigration industry challenging all of these in the courts to prevent the government from doing so.
There you are, that's the answer, John. It's starting, but it's probably not quick enough for any of us.
Yeah, but well done on what you have uncovered.
Well, thank you, John. We are pushing on, and we're very jealous of you being in Brittany, which sounds fantastic. Meanwhile, thank you very much indeed. That was John in Brittany, and lovely, great message here from Bruce Jenkins, who says, Richard, now this is fun. Could you have someone go to the Conservative hustings? I couldn't go myself. I think I might be spotted. Along with the migrant issue you've uncovered, and ask Liz and Rishi what they're going to do about it, and hence get these stories spread far and wide. Great suggestion, Bruce. Any of you who are Conservative members, if you could kindly take a detour, get yourself to a hustings and ask that question. I think on behalf of many, many millions of people, we'd be grateful. So much more. After the break, we're going to be talking to John Lucas, who is a Conservative at The Sun and author of a book, The Albanian Mafia Wars, The Rise of Europe's Deadliest Narcos, because this is the thing that we need to talk about, the rise of Albanian criminal gangs here in the UK. It's uncomfortable. We've got to talk about it. Stay with us, don't go anywhere. It's Tice Talk. It is Talk TV. Welcome back, everyone, to Tice Talk. We're well through the first hour of the show. We've been talking about my expose on the front page of the Mail on Sunday and the double-page spread about the fact that actually 4 in 10 of the migrants crossing the Channel are from a peaceful NATO member that's joining the European Union called Albania. And you have to ask them, if you can come here legally with a visa for 180 days, or you can work under the Seasonal Agricultural Workers Scheme, why would you pay much, much more to undertake a much more dangerous journey to come to the UK? That's the question. John in Burnham-on-the-Sea, he tweets in, Albanians are now the most violent organised crime gangs in London and the home counties, drugs, prostitution, murders, slave labour. He goes on to say, task the Marines and the SBS to turn the boats round. Well, we can answer the truth behind the rise in the organised criminal gangs run by Albanian mafia bosses with my next guest, who's John Lucas, who's a journalist at The Sun. He's also author of the book Albanian Mafia Wars, the Rise of Europe's Deadliest Narcos. John, a very good morning to you. Thanks for being with me on Tice Talk to talk about this really difficult issue. And, you know, I will get a load of flack about this. And, you know, the vast majority of Albanians, of course, will be delightful people, but we have to recognise the growth in these organised gangs, the growth in Albanians in our prisons. And you understand it probably better than most, having studied it.
That's right. I mean, I think the answer to the question you've just posed is twofold. Firstly, why are young men looking to come to Britain? The answer is Albania is a pretty impoverished country. There are not very many opportunities for work for young men there, and you know, they can come to Britain, they can earn good money here, and they can send it back home. That's what's motivating people to come here. Unfortunately, the sad truth is that many of these young guys that we're seeing coming over on the boat are, whether they know it or not, and they may not even realise it, they're actually being trafficked here to work within organised crime.
Yes, and I guess that's a really key point you've made, whether they know it or not. So whether they are knowing foot soldiers of the gangs, or whether they're about to be sort of trapped, almost in a form of modern-day slavery, as foot soldiers for these gangs. Either way, it's horrific.
Yeah, I mean, something that I uncovered researching my book, I spoke to one young man who had left Albania for that very reason. He wanted to earn some money. He didn't really know where he was going. He ended up, woke up one morning, he was in Dublin. Before he was coming to Britain, he was in Dublin. He spent a couple of months working there in a car wash, at which point he's suddenly told, you're going to go to London now. He didn't particularly want to go, but the chaps who'd approached him and said, well, look, we know what village you're from, we know who your mother and father are, you are going to go to London. Ends up in London, and his job there is essentially managing a cannabis factory that's in a gutted house in the middle of Ilford. Doesn't get to leave the property very often, doesn't, it's not, he is paid for it, and he does send the money home, but he doesn't really have a choice in what he's doing.
That's the point. So that is a form of violent modern-day slavery that is going on, and in a sense, it almost with the complicit acceptance of many of the UK authorities.
I think you can kind of see why authorities and law enforcement are sometimes reluctant to talk about crime issues along ethnic or national lines, because they will be criticised for it. However, and sometimes that criticism would be valid as well. However, with the Albanian issue, Albanian organised crime is a unique phenomenon. Some of the things they do are really only done by Albanian organisations. So I think it is a conversation that needs to be had, because it is an exceptional case. Because
the growth of it in the last 5 to 10 years seems to be enormous. You've just got to look at the prison numbers. And as I understand and have read, that actually they're amongst the most violent, and that they're heavily responsible for these county lines and the growth of, in a sense, the cannabis and cocaine activity around the country.
Yeah, well, traditionally the Albanian gangs, they are very violent. A lot of the things that they managed to achieve in Britain, they actually managed to do a lot of it kind of without violence, because they had this reputation for ruthlessness and carrying out vendettas that kind of carried over here. The question with county lines, this is the point I'm making. It's very easy to confuse what the Albanian crime groups do with what we call the county line gangs do. It's very different. The Albanians essentially do county lines on steroids. So county lines gangs are essentially inner city gangs who send a cohort out to towns, villages, and they with a mobile phone, and they essentially supply crack cocaine and heroin. What the Albanians do, they will have a team out. Tunbridge Wells is a great example of this. There's a famous case in Tunbridge Wells. They'll have a team of dealers out dropping off cocaine. So they're not really doing the crack cocaine and heroin, it's cocaine. And it runs almost on a call centre. It's very sophisticated call centre operation. So you're the customer, you phone the call centre. The call centre then uses different phone lines to phone the dealers and instruct the dealers where to go. So when anyone is arrested in this operation, it can't track back to the people who are running it.
Yes.
If you see where I'm coming from. So it's completely extremely sophisticated. And as soon as, the cops hoover up 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of these street dealers, the call centre's still running.
Yes.
And all that happens is more people are drafted in to drive around places like Tunbridge Wells and drop off the cocaine.
And my concern is that actually some of these Albanian young men coming across the channel, that essentially they are foot soldiers filling up the gaps in the gangs when they do get caught by the police. Can we just then move on finally, John, to talk about sort of the money laundering aspect of this? You touched on the issue of car washes. There are hundreds of them owned by the Albanian criminal gangs around the country. And obviously money laundering, there's question marks as to whether that also goes on with barber shops that are appearing everywhere. I mean, this is really big, serious business, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's always been the case. Any kind of cash business has always been, great opportunity for criminals to use it for money laundering. Again, this is something else with the Albanian mafia that's quite unique. They have a very decentralised system, amorphous way of working. You'll find all the big bosses are based back in Albania, where they're kind of protected by a lot of corruption, a lot of official inertia, and all this money, it won't just be being laundered here. It will be going back to Albania, where it's invested in luxury hotel developments, luxury housing developments, and it's something that needs to be tackled on an international level. We of course, our police, we need to arrest people, we need to take them through the courts and try and seize assets. But it's a bit like your local supermarket. The manager could be sacked, all the staff could be sacked. At the end of the day, that supermarket is still going to be there. There's just going to be different people working there. So we have to work with European partners, and also we need Albania to do more, really, to tackle the big bosses who are there and who are kind of investing in the country and laundering their money there.
Yes, indeed. Well, I'm talking to someone later in the show, actually, from Tirana, a specialist in law and security, to discuss exactly that. Because, this is the violence, the growth in the drugs trade, and it just seems to get worse and worse. And, of course, it's the innocent victims who suffer the most in this, in terms of becoming addicted and either addicted to drugs or indeed sort of the trapped modern day slaves.
Yeah.
John, yes.
I was just going to say, I mean, you said it before about the Albanian people. They're lovely, hard-working people who just want to earn a crust, and I mean, they are themselves the biggest victims of the Albanian mafia.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, actually, literally, I've just had a great long text tweet in from an Albanian who says, on the Albanian topic today, and I touched on this in my sermon, it's true a minority of Albanians are involved in crimes and gangs, and some of them made it in the UK, but he says, quite rightly, as I said in my sermon, the majority of Albanians in the UK are law-abiding, hard-working citizens, and he, as an Albanian, is working for the NHS for the last 15 years. And it feels unfair that the crimes of the minority should essentially be overstated. Albania is a small country with 3 million people. And that's a fair point, isn't it, John? But unfortunately, it is the rise in gangs, the notorious nature of them, and the physical violence of them, and the rise in their prisons, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the thing. And it is a difficult topic to talk about, and you can see why the authorities don't really like to broach it in these terms, because you can't denigrate an entire people based on, you know, the criminal underworld of that country. But unfortunately, the way the Albanian mafia operates is unique. They've become extremely powerful. Again, another thing is that they've essentially, I'd say, you know, not quite, but almost taken over the cannabis industry in Britain. Used to be the big farmers were Vietnamese. That's not the case now. They've forced them out. So they're very significant operators.
It's a growth in it. John, thank you so much for your thoughts on that. That's John Lucas, author of the book Albanian Mafia Bosses, The Rise of Europe's Deadliest Narcos. And that's the point, isn't it? The majority, the vast majority of Albanians are hard-working, great people who want to do the right, and this message from someone who's working for the NHS. And it's tragic that they are being essentially tainted by this significant group of mafia bosses, violent criminal gangs, and the growth of it. But that's the real concern. That's why we have to be brave enough to have this difficult decision. The government has the data. They've actually got to share it with us, because then we've got more confidence in what we're doing, what they're doing. Stay with us. Lots going on in our second hour. We're going to be talking about cyber attacks, the economy, and much, much more, fair fuel, and so on. It's Tice Talk. It is Talk TV.
TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 11.
Good morning. Liz Truss has pledged to immediately reverse the rise in national insurance contributions if she becomes Prime Minister. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, the Tory leadership candidate has pledged to bring in an emergency budget to grow the economy. Her supporter and former leadership hopeful Penny Mordaunt has told Talk TV that the plans were needed.
Tax cuts don't have to be inflationary. She's got her programme of tax cuts, which is using the headroom that is there at the moment. But also, because we're dealing with not just the issue of inflation, but also weak demand in the economy, we don't necessarily are going to have inflation as a consequence of those tax cuts.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak wants to introduce another multi-billion-pound package to help families struggling with the rising cost of living. The former Chancellor says his Tory leadership rival Liz Truss was wrong to rule out further direct support for households this winter. And his supporter Robert Halfon told us that wasn't good enough.
There will need to be a package, a significant package of targeted support. And that is the key, targeted support to help those who are struggling. The problem with Liz Truss's proposal is she's spending all that money now, reversing tax cuts for big business. It's only big business that are going to get the corporation tax. And that means what happens later on.
The total number of migrants crossing the English Channel this year has now passed 18,000. The UK's Ministry of Defence confirmed that a further 337 people made the journey in 10 small boats yesterday. It's less than a week after nearly 700 people were rescued and brought to shore by Border Force on Monday. The United Nations has warned of nuclear disaster if Russia continues its shelling at a large power plant in Ukraine. But the Kremlin has blamed Ukraine for the rocket and artillery fire at the plant in Zaporizhzhia, saying it's lucky no radiation has leaked so far. The US has hit out at China, calling its military drills in Taiwanese territory provocative and irresponsible. Taiwan's defense ministry confirmed that more exercises were carried out this morning, with aircraft and ships being dispatched in reaction to the threat. And the UK is set to see another heat wave next week, with temperatures projected to reach the mid-30s. It comes as water companies are under pressure from Environment Secretary George Eustace to enforce hosepipe bans during the prolonged dry weather. That's the latest for now. Now it's time for the weather.
World News sponsors Talk TV weather.
It will be a dry and sunny morning across much of England and Wales. However, parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland will see some rain accompanied by a brisk wind. As we move into lunchtime, the outbreaks of rain will continue across parts of Scotland. Eastern Scotland, though, should see some lengthy, dry and bright spells develop thanks to the shelter from the mountains. The north coast of Northern Ireland may also see some rain, along with Cumbria and Northumberland. Elsewhere across the rest of England and Wales, it will be another dry and sunny day with just a little bit of fair weather cloud developing. It will be feeling warmer than it did on Saturday, with temperatures already climbing into the low 20s by lunchtime. Temperatures in the south should peak around 28 Celsius.
Times World News sponsors Talk TV weather.
Why do you think shouting loudly throughout their interviews is doing any service to people?
99% of the time, I'm actually stood silent. After it's not brilliant. You can shout as much as you like.
That's the point, Steve.
Hi there and welcome back. We have flown into the second hour, and I have to be honest, I think that Twitter, our Twitter pages, may have almost exploded with the number of tweets that are coming in and text messages. It really is quite extraordinary. Lots of suggestions. Lots of people saying, yes, of course, the majority of Albanians are fantastic, law-abiding, hard-working people, but it is that criminal minority. Really good suggestion here from Sandwedge, who says we should bring in a law that basically means that in these car washes and barbers, they can only use card machines in order to try and address the issue of money laundering, which is absolutely massive and is, of course, how these criminal gangs, they launder their money. But talking of technical issues and the cyber problems, whether it's hacks or whether it's technical difficulties, another thing that didn't really get much coverage this week, but I think is really important because we've got the NHS obviously in crisis with waiting lists, and it appears there was a large cyber attack on NHS 111 this week, which led to ambulance services being hugely delayed, reports of having to revert to not being able to use the computer systems, but actually back to the old pen and paper, and more delays for hospitals and waiting lists. And so I wanted to discuss this with an expert who understands this. What's really going on? Is this the beginning of something even worse? Or actually, may it be being slightly overstated, heaven forbid. So I'm delighted to be joined this morning on Tice Talk by Philip Ingram, who is a former senior British military intelligence officer. Philip, good morning. Thanks for joining me. So this didn't really get that much pickup, but actually, it sounds to me pretty serious if you've got a major NHS system being potentially hacked, and that's what the outsourcing computer company, I think called Advanced, has suggested. You obviously understand this area. What have you learnt out of this, and is this the beginning of something much more? Could it be a foreign state? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting. Advanced has made the statement, and then we've had some reporting attributed to the National Crime Agency. That's unusual for a cyber attack. I'd expect something to come from the National Cyber Security Centre, which is the front end of GCHQ, the government's communication and spy centre. And we haven't heard that yet. And the implications of the NHS could have been very serious indeed, but it seems to have been a little bit of disruption that's gone on. And again, there are no statements to say whether they've got it fixed, what the cause was, who it was attributed to, but it does fit with a pattern of things that have happened over the last few years.
Interesting. So Advanced is the firm that provides digital services for NHS 111. Their chief operating officer said, we can confirm the incident is related to a cyber attack, and we immediately isolated all our health and care environment. So they're pretty certain that it was such an... I mean, how often is this happening and we perhaps don't hear about it?
It's happening on a daily basis. You know, our computers are being probed, whether they're personal computers, whether they're corporate computers, whether they're huge organisations. They've been probed continuously. You know, I monitor my own, and I'm getting probed 200-300 times a day. Some of those will turn into attacks. And depending on the organisation, depending on who's doing it, there's opportunistic probes going on all the time. And at the moment, with the conflict that there is in Ukraine, the Russian cyber teams are very active. And again, with what's going on between China and Taiwan, the Chinese cyber teams are very active. And both countries want to send messages out to different parts of the West, either directly to say, we can mess around with you as much as you can disrupt us. But there's also the danger of things accidentally breaking out, where there are cyber attacks that are focused on a particular effect in a particular country, like happened with the NotPetya attack in 2017, where the Russians tried to attack Ukrainian businesses and then it escaped into the wild, as they say.
And presumably when government departments outsource services, which often is the right thing to do with the appropriate conditions, so here, if they outsource it to an IT specialist, presumably part of the criteria is the quality of their systems to prevent hacking. Yeah, so that presumably is in place. Do you think this is at the upper end of sophistication of hacks to have got in this?
We haven't got the detail, and that's the difficulty that there is. The outsourcing of IT and cyber security support is much better than trying to do it in-house, because it costs an awful lot of money to try and keep people up with the right sort of skills. The companies that are providing it, especially into the likes of the NHS or any other element of our critical national infrastructure, work very closely with the National Cyber Security Centre and talk to them on a daily, if not or weekly, if not daily basis, making sure that they understand where the threats are and and they've got the measures in place to try and counter any new threats that they're getting indicators of. So it's a very close working relationship, and it tends to work very well indeed. And I think the fact that this hasn't turned into something bigger shows that the capability is there to identify the attacks coming in and take the mitigating measures that are needed to try and stop it from promulgating and causing a lot more damage. Given the volume of attacks that are happening on a daily, weekly basis, that's good news.
And Philip, tell us a bit about this National Cyber Security Centre. How long has that been in existence? Who does that report to? So that we know a bit more about that, hopefully to give us some confidence.
Yeah, well, the National Cyber Security Centre is brilliant. I'd encourage anyone who's interested in cybersecurity just to Google them or look them up in another search engine. Their site gives a huge amount of free advice. They are the front end of government communications headquarters, so they're the bit that interacts with industry and with critical national infrastructure on behalf of the government and the country to set the procedures in place, to give threat information, to give advice, and they work with industry to try and bring in some of the best ideas that are coming from industry and make sure that those are promulgated out. It's been going for, I can't remember the exact year it was set up, but it's 5 or 6 years now, and its first chief executive was Kieran Martin. He has moved out about 18 months ago, and I talk to Kieran frequently.
Right.
And it's this relationship with the public and providing advice. It's a model for how to do cybersecurity globally.
And so it's a government department or organisation?
Yeah, government department, part of government communications headquarters, which works to this front end bit will work to 2 or 3 different government departments and what it's doing, but it's part funded by that and supporting out to industry. It gives free advice out and it's freely available.
And is that full of brilliant software engineers, anti-hackers? Is it the sort of the epicenter of the best anti-hackers?
Oh, it's the epicenter of the best anti-hackers who've got access to even better anti-hackers around the world by dipping into the sorts of resources that can be provided from our different allies, including the Americans and the Five Eyes community, but also into industry. And it's that link into industry where it's bringing in the latest things that can help companies is there.
That's good to hear. That is, it's always good to share encouraging news. Philip, how likely do you think this latest hack might have been on behalf of a rogue foreign nation?
Yeah, well, it's very difficult to tell because there's so little detail that's come out. But given the fact that it's attacking critical national infrastructure and there's no money to be made in it and all the rest of it, it is more likely to be a hostile state, Russia or China, or one of the large criminal groups that they subcontract their work out to, like the Conti group that attacked the Irish Health Service last year.
Right. Philip, thank you so much indeed. Fascinating to hear about that. That's Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer, talking about the hacking on the NHS, the National Cyber Security Centre that we should draw confidence in. Really interesting stuff. We're going to head up to Yorkshire before the break because Glenn is patiently waiting on the line. Good morning, Glenn. How are you doing? What's on your mind?
Fantastic show. Some good detail as well, so thank you for that. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. I'm waiting with bated breath, Glenn.
So basically, all I wanted to say was a lot of the employees that work in the car parks.
Yes.
An awful lot of them, the rank and file, the foot soldiers, very few of them can speak English.
Yes.
I know that because where I live, there's quite a lot of them that rent. But the point is this, that there was the very first gentleman. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm listening, Glenn. We're listening intently.
The very first gentleman on your show from Liverpool,
yes,
he mentioned about the usage of these economic migrants and illegal migrants coming over and using the NHS. And
yes,
2 or 3 weeks ago, Yasmin Alibaya-Brown on the Jeremy Vine show absolutely went to town on this person for suggesting that. So those in power and those who have got authority, they won't accept. A lot of the GPs and a lot of the medical staff, they just won't tell the truth. Well, we know that gets abused,
That's right. I think it's just inevitable that if you've got essentially tens and tens of thousands of people, they're going to need medical help, and that's going to consume resources, and they don't really want to talk about it, do they, Glenn?
Oh no, that Yasmin Alibaya-Brown, she's really strongly opinionated. But I mean, you know, like you said, and I fully agree with you. I dare say many of the Albanians, very hard-working, lovely people. But I've noticed one thing, that very rarely these lads that work in these car washes, they very rarely identify as Albanian.
No, that's right.
They identify as Roma, and quite often it's Czechoslovakian Roma. And the reason is because they don't have to accept card payment methods, because the Roma people have been given permission not to still be paid in cash. If you go to scrapyards,
yes,
if you run a business, you receive cheques.
Well, that's the point, though.
Special minority.
Well, no one should have any special dispensation. It was a very sensible suggestion.
There've been government dispensation, and unfortunately, the Tory government.
Well, there we are. Glenn, thank you for...
It's not my opinion, it's just a fact. But,
yeah.
But anyway, fabulous show.
Thank you very much, Glenn, for your thoughts there. I think that's a really good suggestion. All of these places, you know, if we're worried about money laundering, the simple thing is no cash. Only use credit card payments. But give us a call, 0344 499 1000 with your thoughts. Lots and lots of support and messages coming in. Very nice one here from Brad, who says, congratulations on the 1-year anniversary. Is very complimentary about presenting, and thank you for highlighting the subjects that others steer clear of. Brad is a member of the Conservative Party, but if PR ever becomes a reality, you will have my vote. Well, thanks for that, Brad. Stay with us, lots coming up. We're going to be talking to John Redwood after the break. It's Tice Talk, it's Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends. That was a fascinating interview with Philip Ingram, MBE, about the cyber attacks, and we're also touching on the issue of money laundering, how to stop it, and I was suggesting that we should prevent cash being used in, for example, some of these barbers that are propping up everywhere. Give us a call if you have also seen one propping up near you. But Tony actually says, quite interesting sort of challenge to that, says, would you trust your card details with someone who's a false name and could be involved with a crime gang? No thanks. But I think the point there is, what we're hoping, Tony, is that if there's no cash allowed and that actually the authorities, the police, check it regularly, then that would reduce the likelihood of criminality. But I take your point. So that was from Tony. Thanks for that. Lots of other messages coming in. I'm hoping we're now moving to talk about the Bank of England recession. We're waiting for John Redwood to join us, but we've got another message here. It's clear that if the Albanians are able to apply for visas to fly here, then that these people coming across the channel are part of Albanian gangs who wouldn't get visas or have got something to hide. That is another interesting observation there. And just loads and loads of messages just pouring in about this. Pablo says, UK, Richard, land of milk and honey, growing numbers of refugees and asylum seekers falling into poverty in Britain. Well, the sad truth is, because of the cost of living crisis and the emerging recession that faces us, there are millions and millions of British citizens who are really finding it a great struggle, and that's what we're hoping to talk to John Redwood about. I'm just looking at Aaron to see whether or not we've got him on the line. We've lost him. We have lost the great John Redwood, but we will find him and get back to him pretty imminently. A message here which says that Richard Sue says successive governments have failed, Labour would do nothing. So what do we do? Voices are ignored. We bring up illegal immigration, election time, promises are handed out like sweets, delicious sweets they keep promising, but nothing is done. I think Sue's right, and whether it's Truss or Sunak, they talk about trying to stop the Channel issue using the Rwanda migrant scheme, but I don't think anybody really believes that will happen. Let's go to Wiltshire to see what Peter thinks. Morning, Peter.
Good morning, Richard. Can you hear me?
Absolutely, loud and clear. What's on your mind?
Several things. I've voiced it before. The immigration crisis, I think the only answer is to beat it at the beaches. And I wonder where Priti Patel is. We haven't heard from her for about a month.
We haven't, have we?
Why she isn't doing something in the meantime of all this election nonsense going on, and at least trying to do something, engage with the French. I would like to see a private force stationed in France, paid back, say, 25 grand, £1,000 bonus for each boat they seize before they even get to the water.
You're talking about a sort of a French militia, are you, Peter?
No, I'm talking about a British private organisation.
So you're talking about British mercenaries in France. I'm not sure that's going to go down terribly well, Peter. Surely it's better to... the appropriate thing to do is to have a joint security operation, because what I learned from this report, Peter, is our military assets know exactly where these boats are launching from at the moment they launch. So actually, if there's a joint operation, they should be able to be there within a matter of minutes.
Right. So what we need is Priti Patel to approach the French and say, look, we'll bring over our people and show the French police what to do and embarrass them into a situation where they just sit by and look. I accepted that. I think that offering legal aid to people is wrong because the average person can't get legal aid free. I think that should be addressed or deleted. You know, lawyers are making money out of this.
Well, they are, aren't they? Lots of vested interests are making money there, Peter.
And the third thing is, on Albanians, I've worked with lots of different people, Romanians and things, when I was doing contract work, and some are good, some are bad, and all this. But in our area, I live about 100 miles from London. I spoke to some Albanians about 2 months ago, and they come down and they go all over the country laying block paving for people it's a company in our area, a registered company, but they are traveller-based people that have got a site nearby. So they come down from London and lay all the blocks.
Right. But could you pay them with cash, or was it with only cash, or you don't know?
I didn't ask them.
No, well,
there were 3 or 4 of them, but I said, and they said, well, we go everywhere. We go to Leeds. They come down on the train. They do the work. So what if they're doing the work for the traveller people? They must be doing it at a cheaper rate.
That's an interesting question. These are all the questions that we need to ask. Peter, thank you very much indeed for that. I'm going to go to Samantha. We are struggling to find John Redwood, Conservative MP for Wokingham. He's got lost, although maybe he's being offered a job as we speak by Liz Truss, because I've already had a tweet in on that from someone. Mr. Steve says, tell Sir John if he doesn't get a job in Liz's cabinet, I'm ripping up my membership. He's my hero. Samantha, good morning. You're in Manchester. What's going on? Is Sir John Redwood your hero? What's on your mind?
Mine is basically going back to the Brexit, when I think most of the population of Great Britain will agree that we voted to come out of Brexit because of the major issues with immigration, and that people that, have lived and worked all their life in this country, basically immigration taking over. We couldn't get doctor's appointments, dentist appointments. The hospital people were just left on trolleys. And I do believe that, my mum's 77. She's just had to wait 3 months for an actual doctor's appointment, and that was a telephone conversation.
That's madness. Absolute madness, Samantha. 3 months for a GP.
3 months for a GP, and that was just to actually speak to the GP. That wasn't to see them. She's had cancer twice in the last 4 years. They just you can't get a dentist appointment. My son's epileptic. He takes a lot of medication. He's only 22. He's got trouble at the moment with he needs to see a dentist. They're saying you can't get in. You've got to wait absolutely months. Just come back next January. What in the meantime? Major health issues. I do believe the country is going to rack and ruin, and I don't believe that anybody, no matter who runs this country now, is going to be able to do anything.
Well, Samantha, no, I think a lot of people are very concerned and very gloomy. I may be being naive, but my glass is always half full. It's never half empty. I think with good leadership, it is doable, but it's not easy. That is for sure, Samantha. That's why I'm campaigning for many things that need reforming. Thank you, Samantha, for that. We're going to head down from Manchester to the Isle of Wight, where Susan's on the line. Hi, Susan.
Richard, great programme and really good information that you've revealed. It's fantastic.
Thank you, thank you.
I just did a quick Google, and this information is from 2018. But I just thought, what are France doing? What's happening with France with the Albanian refugees in their country, to see if they've got the same situation as us. And this article I found from on the web was talking about what happened in Germany. So the Germans apparently in 2018, they banned all refugees from Albania.
Did they? I hadn't seen that. That's interesting. Actually, I'm going to talk to my guest at 12 o'clock about that. That's an interesting observation because the rise of the criminal gangs, is it just in the UK or is it around the rest of Europe as well?
Yeah. Apparently, though, what happened then was, because they were banned from Germany, when they arrived in Germany, they were told they had to spend their own money to get back to Albania, and if they couldn't, they were then banned from the Schengen area for 5 years, and Germany sent them back as well. Right. But then the number of refugees going into France, this was in 2018, rose fivefold.
Interesting. Susan, thank you very much for that intel, that information. That was Susan on the Isle of Wight with her concerns. Stay with us. We may have found John Redwood, we may not, but we've also got Howard Cox from Fair Fuel UK to talk about the price of fuel, why we're being ripped off and how we stop it. Stay with us. It is, of course, Tice Talk. It is Talk TV.
I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is Talk TV. I think my most memorable and proudest moment in journalism over all these years is actually being on air during the lockdowns, even when I had COVID myself. Over the last 2 years, getting people to tell their stories, not just about people who lost loved ones to COVID, but people who lost their fundamental freedoms, their children's schooling, their mental health, their physical health, their businesses, and giving people a chance to tell their stories about how it affected them.
This is Talk TV News.
Good morning. Liz Truss has pledged to immediately reverse the rise in national insurance contributions if she becomes Prime Minister. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, the Tory leadership candidate has pledged to bring in an emergency budget to grow the economy. Her supporter and former leadership hopeful, Penny Mordaunt, told Talk TV the plans were needed.
Tax cuts don't have to be inflationary. She's got her programme of tax cuts, which is using the headroom that is there at the moment, but also because we're dealing with not just the issue of inflation, but also weak demand in the economy, we don't necessarily are going to have inflation as a consequence of those tax cuts.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak wants to introduce another multi-billion-pound package to help families struggling with the rising cost of living. The former Chancellor says his Tory leadership rival Liz Truss was wrong to rule out further direct support for households this winter. The total number of migrants crossing the English Channel this year has now passed 18,000. The UK's Ministry of Defence confirmed that a further 337 people made the journey in 10 small boats yesterday. It's less than a week after nearly 700 people were rescued and brought to shore by Border Force on Monday. The UK is set to see another heat wave next week, with temperatures projected to reach the mid-30s. It comes as water companies are under pressure to enforce hosepipe bans during the dry spell. And Team GB's multi-gold medal-winning Paralympic swimmer Ellie Phillips has joined the lineup for this year's Strictly Come Dancing. The 27-year-old says she's bursting with excitement, but petrified as she becomes the 6th confirmed contestant for the series, which starts in September. That's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back, my friends. We are halfway through the second hour of a manically busy, fizzing show of Tice Talk. There's been so much going on the back of that front page on the Mail on Sunday. We've also been talking about cyber attacks, taking people's views. We've lost the great John Redwood, whether or not he had a better invitation or not. But anyway, we'll try and get him back later in the show. Some of you will be disappointed because he's your hero and you want him in Liz's cabinet. I'm saying that because I assume that it's Liz Truss. That's why I'm not really talking about the leadership election. I think it's done and dusted. It's taking too long. Frankly, I think they should stop the contest early, but of course that will not happen. Just before we link up with Howard Cox here in the studio, a couple of tweets here from Silent Weapons, who says, Richard, you're advocating a central bank digital currency just because some Albanian money launderers cash is king. You're planting the very seed that Rishi wants to control all aspects of our lives. No, I'm not. I'm definitely not saying that. I don't want a central bank digital currency. I'm just saying that maybe with some of these organisations using card only may reduce it. But maybe I'm being too optimistic. Who knows? What I do know is that there's no optimism in the price of fuel. We continue to be ripped off by it. Every month I have the great Howard Cox, the founder of Fair Fuel UK, here in the studio in my segment called Talk Gear. Howard, a very good morning to you. Great to see you. And, well, there's a lot going on, but as always, as part of the cost of living crisis, the price of fuel is a huge issue. You had a full-page article last week in The Sun, and we've got the leaders battling it out, being challenged on fuel. What's the inside scoop? What can you share with my lovely viewers and listeners about your hopes and fears for the price of fuel?
Well, hang on a second. Who can we talk to? There's no one in Whitehall, no one in Westminster, all on holiday, especially our Chancellor. We're in a cost of living crisis, Richard, and the biggest fueler of that cost of living price. Sorry to use the pun, but fundamentally, it's petrol and diesel prices. And one of the things that I'm putting out tomorrow, and this is, you know, just launching on your show, exclusive to you at the moment.
And we've got another scoop on my show, a second one. Excellent.
Yeah, not as good as the one you produced earlier. That was fantastic. Congratulations on that. No, what we're seeing is we're looking at the oil price, and oil price is falling, and it's falling to a considerably low level at the moment. We're looking at something like £85, and I'm talking sterling, not dollars, etc. But when it was the same price...
That's pounds per barrel of oil.
Brent oil, yes. When it was the same price, right, the price now, it is now, back in February...
Yes.
Yeah, get ready for this. Pump prices were around about 30 to 35p lower.
Let's just say that slowly, folks. And if you've got a question for Howard, please do call, and we'll take your questions for Howard, 0344 499 1000, to get some interaction. Your views, what's the price locally in your pump? Are you sitting in a queue trying to buy some cheap diesel or some cheap petrol? Howard's just said that the price is 35p a litre more, give or take, than back in February when the price of oil in sterling terms was the same. So... OK, if I'm being generous, maybe they've got slightly higher labour costs, slightly higher transport costs.
And, of course, there's inflation.
And there's inflation, which is part of that. And what about the 5p that Rishi generously gave us? Is that...
Well, we take it into account, it would be 40p, wouldn't it? That's the point. We're talking about 35 with the fuel duty cut.
Wow. So what's that telling us?
Well, it's telling us that to fill the average tank at the moment, it's costing £20 more than it should do.
Wow. So essentially, that money is disappearing into someone else's pocket other than the consumer.
Yeah, somewhere in the fuel supply chain, and we've seen the BP and Shell profits in the last week or so, and they've been absolutely obscene. And can I just say to all, to the viewers and the listeners that I'm a pro-profit-driven economy, and we should do that. But I'm not pro-profiteering, and that's what we're seeing at the moment. And I'll go as far to say this is a cartel type environment I'm seeing, and I'm working very closely with some economic analysts on this one, which hopefully in the next few weeks I'll have that report out. But fundamentally, I think there's racketeering and profiteering going on, and it's got to stop.
And I think this is a key point. And likewise, I believe in free markets, but they have to be sensibly regulated, and you have to stop cartel-like behaviour. And racketeering is an important point because, you had sort of racketeering, profiteering in the world wars.
Yes.
But the truth is, we're not as a nation at war, but we are in a warlike situation in Central Europe that's having a huge impact on what's going on. And the fear is that basically parts of the fuel chain are essentially using that situation to their own advantage. And it just feels to me, and again, I believe in free markets, but if there is that racketeering going on, the government's got to call it out. And I believe that the government should put the industry on notice. Either it's going to stop, or we're going to clamp down on you like a ton of bricks.
Well, that's the whole point of what I'm working with backbench MPs. We're saying we want to introduce a pump price regulatory body. We're calling it Pump Watch. We've got Ofgem, Ofcom, Ofwhat. I've said it on your show many times. We're not trying to actually put the big brother on you and sitting on top of every move you make, but fundamentally we just want transparency and honesty. That's what we want. You make a shed load of profit, good luck to you. But don't exploit drivers in a time of crisis. And a time of when people are dying in the Ukraine, you're making a shed load of money. It can't be right.
It can't be right. So you've got Ofgem, you've got Ofwhat, and maybe we need Off-Pump.
Well, we did...
You thought of that?
Yeah, we did think of that, but we decided Pump Watch is...
Pump Watch is better.
And I printed the stickers.
You printed the stickers. But in seriousness, I think that the government has to say to the industry... Look, in the Second World War, there were fixed prices for things. If the industry is not going to deal with this in a voluntary way, then actually the government's going to have to clamp down, because we've got a cost of living crisis, we've got an economic emergency, and the fuel barons and others somewhere along the system, and it's very often it's not actually at the pumps, is it? It's further up the chain, who are taking the mickey, and if they don't, if they don't behave responsibly, then the government's got to say, well, worst case, you say, well, look, there's a fixed price and there's a fixed profit.
Absolutely right, and let's be clear about this. A lot of independent garages probably listening to your show right this minute. they're not making much margins. They're not seeing margins. I've got about 12 garages across the country who've been telling me bluntly, and they've been showing me their invoices, they're showing me what the bulk fuel they're buying and putting into their forecourts. They're making anywhere between 3 to sort of 7p per litre. But we're talking about something like 40, 50p per litre in the whole supply chain. And when you see, and I'm just looking at Germany's 35p cheaper. We're looking at places like Italy, 25p cheaper, Spain, 25p cheaper. And there's one thing we can do in a cost of living crisis. At a stroke of a pen, our new Chancellor, whatever he's doing or wherever he is, and I hope he's listening...
Or the new Chancellor, or she...
Oh, yeah, I know, but the one now...
The one now, yes.
Now, we don't need an emergency budget. He just needs to sit down a piece of paper, I order a 25p cut on duty. And I know the Reform Party said
but that
20p.
We've said 20p, but I'm not sure that's enough at the moment.
You're absolutely right.
It's appalling. If you've got a call for Howard, give us a call, 0344 499 1000, and he will try his best to answer it. Stay with us, don't go anywhere. It's Tice Talk, it's Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to Tice Talk. We're approaching the end of the second hour. I don't know where time goes when you're having fun. But Pablo the Hat, he has just messaged in, Richard, they don't want to cut taxes on green levies to stimulate consumer spending, as this is against the green agenda of less consumption and the net zero targets. With a little picture, a great picture actually, paying more taxes to the government will not change the weather. That's absolutely right. But we do need to try and persuade the new leader that things need to change. We need to boost consumer spending in order to reduce the risk of a recession. We're going to go to Telford, where Lee is waiting, hopefully, to ask a question for Howard. Good morning, Lee.
Morning, Richard. Morning, Howard.
Morning.
Go for it.
I have a Shell fuel card, and every week I get a text message with a price of my fuel per litre for the next week plus the VAT. I filled up, I put 50 litres in. Okay, that cost me at the pump was $1.89, and so that cost me £93 for 50 litres. Okay, I think the fuel that I'll actually pay based on my fuel card. So my fuel card this next week is $1.42 plus VAT, which is $1.70 or thereabouts.
Yes.
So that's nearly 20p difference per litre for that same fuel. So instead of me being using my fuel card as a customer, that goes in there, they'll be charging extra 20p per litre. That's without what the government take off or everything else like that. So I do think that these premium petrol stations are taking advantage of consumers.
So what do you say to that, Howard?
Well, I've seen and heard this before. These Shell cards, etc. You think you're getting a deal, but you're not, are you? It's no way are you doing that, and they are taking advantage. And it comes back to the fact that it's the big.
Howard, it's the other way round. Howard, it's the other way round. Yeah, I pay my Shell card, okay, to a company crew, okay, and I'm getting 20p cheaper than the forecourts.
Oh, from the Shell card.
Yeah, from the Shell card.
Okay. Well,
So
I've heard that there's not much benefit, but you're absolutely right. If they can do that, you can wonder why in the fuel supply chain why that money can't be passed on to everyone.
Correct.
It sounds like we all need one of those Shell cards sharpishly.
Yeah. So
they're not. They don't always work. I can tell you that now. I've got some individuals complaining using these actually discount cards, and they don't give a great deal all the time.
Well, you're right, Howard, but it all depends on which one. Because I was on a one that tracked it, but I moved to a different product on using that fuel card, and it goes up quickly, but it can't. Sometimes it comes down really slowly.
Lee, brilliant. Thank you so much for. Yeah, just quickly, your line's not great, Lee.
Yeah. No. Okay, quickly. I think you need to change the name of your party instead of Reform UK.
Yeah, it's right. What do you want it changed to? I'm not promising anything.
Ask your guy that spoke to us.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Lee. Goodness me, it's hard enough creating a brand anyway, but the production team are laughing and chuckling, so it may or may not be suitable for a family show. But we're going to head from Telford down to London, where Nick's on the line. Morning, Nick.
Yes, good morning to you. Thank you for having me on.
Great pleasure.
What I wanted to say was that when it comes to fuel prices, and it can be all, we're talking about all fuel prices here, whether it's petrol at the pumps or whether it's domestic fuel like electricity and gas and so on, the real issue is the carbon taxes. And that's not to be confused with the so-called green levies. Because it seems to me that a lot of people don't understand the difference. I mean, the carbon taxes are actually what's called, there's the technical terms of the climate change levy and the carbon price support. And those are what put the price of fuel up in the first place. The other things, like the green levies, are percentage increase on top of that, and VATs and excise duties are another percentage increase on top of that again. But the initial price problem, the initial price increase, is caused by the carbon taxes, and those are what we need to cut.
And how much is that?
Well, that changes all the time, so that's not clear. That's not clear. In fact, I would like to ask you.
Nick, we'll just ask Howard if he knows how much it is.
The government never actually
tells us. Well, let's see what Howard knows, Nick.
Well, what I understand, it's about $240 at the moment, a carbon credit, and I think that's what you're talking about. And it should be round about the 60 or 70. There's a lot of people, just like oil prices, in this market of volatility, gambling on things like this. And carbon credits are effectively actually an encouragement used for investing in green technology for the future. But I'm afraid there's a lot of people keeping the money and putting it in their pockets and not actually investing in a cleaner future. It's just pure gambling again, and I'm so angry and livid about that. And particularly the oil. And just going and taking that a bit further, we're finding that these big companies, Shell, BP, they own commodity brokers. And they're gambling on the price of oil.
Yes.
They employ speculators, and that's another income for them, a huge generation, and not just the refining area. Everything further up the fuel supply chain, and the cost of oil is being dictated by a volatility in the marketplace, and fundamentally it's a gambling mentality.
You're probably aware of that, Nick. There's huge trading in carbon credits and carbon taxes.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. But what I also know is that Britain has charges more for its carbon credits than most other countries around the world. All our economic competitors and all people who live in other countries, they pay less than we do.
Well, Nick, you're so right. Thank you very much for that call.
One more point, please.
Go for it quickly. I've got to go to Liverpool.
A big point, because the point is, the argument against what I'm suggesting and what you're suggesting is, of course, climate change and net zero and so on. But I want to make this one point that nobody seems to have ever made. That the UK accounts for over 2% of global GDP, about 2.3% of global GDP, but under 1% of global greenhouse gases. Right. So we're already twice as good, if you want, in terms of that.
Nick,
other countries need to do their bit.
You're so right, Nick. That is right. One of the reasons for that is we outsource so much of our industry, which makes us more dependent on nations like China, who may not have our interests in heart, and that's the danger.
Countries that produce
that's right.
In a more polluting way.
Nick, brilliant. Thank you very much for a fantastic call about carbon credits, carbon taxes. That was Nick in London. And look, it's absolutely right. We're doing more than our bit, and the problem is other nations are looking back at us and they're literally laughing in our face at our naive stupidity. Let's head back up to Liverpool, that's been listening carefully. Tracy. Good morning, Tracy.
Good morning, Richard. Good morning, Howard.
Good morning.
It's just a quick question for Howard. I live in Liverpool, Howard, and the Tesco's done by mine is £1. It's £1.87.
That's diesel.
No, that's unleaded petrol.
What?
So if I go, So if I go down to my sister's, which is literally about not even quite a mile away, the same Tesco pump, the same brand,
yes,
is £1.76. And I see this all the time throughout all the year, and it's the same with Shell garages and everything. Depending on where you go to each Shell garage or BP garage, I don't understand when they're the same company. How do they have different petrol prices on the forecourt?
Great question, Tracy. Let's see what Howard says.
Tracy, that's an incredibly question that is probably said by about 20 million drivers every day. They go past one garage and it's a BP, and they go down the road, it's a BP, and the prices can be up to 10, 15p difference. You're absolutely spot on. And this is why we need Pump Watch. We need to get to the bottom of this. One of the issues we have... Are you in a rural area?
Semi-rural, I'd say,
okay.
Yeah.
You'll find that I've done a lot of analysis over the years on this one. Rural areas tend to be much, much more expensive simply because they can be. There's the market. And I'm happy for 2 or 3p difference, but not the sort of magnitude you just said. And I was shocked when I said to you, I thought that was diesel. That is ridiculous. Now, I've written to every single supermarket boss in the last 2 weeks asking to justify the differences of prices and also the level they are, because traditionally supermarkets, particularly Asda and Morrison's, used to, when oil prices change and they became, prices went rocketing up and coming down like a feather, they were the first to actually reduce their pump prices quite considerably and actually influence the independents, and that's what was good news. That's not happening now because it's much more, unfortunately, most of these companies now are owned by venture capitalists who are only interested in the bottom line.
Tracy, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for that call about the differentials. Tracy, I'm going to go to a couple of tweets because there's a couple of other really good questions, but really appreciate that call on the huge difference. The answer to that is, folks, whatever you do, shop around, look really closely at the prices. They're changing daily, weekly. Look around, share information. There's various things. Question here for Howard. Why are supermarkets now charging more than local petrol stations when for years they've been much cheaper, some 4 to 7p a litre cheaper? That's from Neil.
Well, that's what I was bringing up just now, the point I'm making. Traditionally, the supermarkets used to do that, but they're now less customer motivated, and because of the high cost of food, they used to have footfall, didn't they? They used to actually encourage them with a discount on the fuel to come in to go and use their supermarket. Spend £50, we'll give you 10p off a litre. That type of thing. That's completely gone up the wall because everything is rocketing. Even their input costs and their cost of actually buying food is rocketed, etc. And it's not such an incentive for them to actually use. So they've got to make more profit at the pumps.
And some of them now are being owned by these big private equity groups, and so they're looking... we've got another message here from Cliff in Wokingham who says, I would like an itemised till receipt that breaks down the cost of your fuel with all the duty, tax and the actual cost.
Well, that's absolutely brilliant. About 3 years ago, Peter Aldous MP for Waveney did a 10-minute rule bill, and I actually wrote his bill for him, which fundamentally said, can we have every single tax displayed on the bill? And currently, fuel duty and tax to the government is round about just under half. It's around about 47%. But the VAT, etc. But one of the big things that everyone gets angry about is VAT on fuel duty as well.
So this is the next tweet that's come in from Jill. Thank you for this, Jill, which says, question for Howard, surely VAT on petrol needs to be reduced and the price of petrol capped. Otherwise, the prices will creep up again despite any VAT reduction.
You're absolutely right, and Richard suggested that. We're getting to the situation now we might need a cap on tax. There used to be a thing called a fuel price escalator, whereby if tax was high, if oil was high and pump prices went high, the government's percentage take came down. And equally, when it comes down, it went up, but the tax take was the same all the time. And if we had that, that would be totally and utterly fair. Income tax the same, corporations tax the same. Why isn't fuel duty and VAT on fuel the same, always the same when you fill up?
No, it's a really good point. And finally, Howard, another message come in. What's your view on Just Stop Oil, those lovely eco-protesters, hiring 30 diesel-powered coaches to bring people to London to protest?
Well, I think you said it in that completely. I'm not allowed to swear on a family show like this, but it's pathetic, absolutely pathetic and hypocritical.
It really is extraordinary. One final one. Why is diesel dearer than petrol when it's a less refined product? From Trev in Cornwall.
Totally true. It's cheaper to produce diesel than petrol. There's a couple of reasons for that, but it's mainly because the fact is our tax is the same on diesel as is in petrol, and I'm afraid they exploit it. We have to bring diesel in most of the time. Petrol is refined because it's a volatile product, but we're the only country in the world, virtually the only country in the world, that prices diesel above petrol.
Madness.
Again, it's the government.
It's the government. It's got to change. Hopefully Howard will pressure them. Thank you so much, Howard Cox, founder of Fair Fuel, for all those thoughts. Stay with us, folks. We are going to be talking about all sorts in the third hour. We're going to be going back to Albania to get more expertise on that, and also some good climate news. Stay with us. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV.
TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 12.
Good afternoon. We start with breaking news, and a fifth man has been arrested in connection with the disappearance of student nurse Awami Davis after detectives renewed their appeal for information. It's exactly a month since the 24-year-old woman from Essex was last seen in South London on the 7th of July. 2 people have been arrested on suspicion of murder and 3 on suspicion of kidnap. Liz Truss has pledged to immediately reverse the rise in national insurance contributions if she becomes Prime Minister. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, the Tory leadership candidate has pledged to bring in an emergency budget to grow the economy. Her supporter and former leadership hopeful Penny Mordaunt told Talk TV the plans were needed.
Tax cuts don't have to be inflationary. She's got her programme of tax cuts, which is using the headroom that is there at the moment, but also because we're dealing with not just the issue of inflation, but also weak demand in the economy, we don't necessarily are going to have inflation as a consequence of those tax cuts.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak wants to introduce another multi-billion-pound package to help families struggling with the rising cost of living. The former Chancellor says his Tory leadership rival Liz Truss was wrong to rule out further direct support for households this winter. His supporter Damien Hines says borrowing for tax cuts will make things worse.
And the problem with having unfunded tax cuts, which means borrowing more, which means interest rates going up, is you can make inflation worse. The inflation we've got right now is because of what are called supply-side problems to do with COVID, issues on supply chains and Putin's brutality in Ukraine. What we mustn't do is make that become kind of self-fulfilling.
The total number of migrants crossing the English Channel this year has now passed 18,000. The UK's Ministry of Defence confirmed that a further 337 people made the journey in 10 small boats yesterday. It's less than a week after nearly 700 people were rescued and brought to shore by Border Force on Monday. And the UK is set to see another heat wave next week, with temperatures projected to reach the mid-30s. It comes as water companies are under pressure to enforce hosepipe bans during the dry spell. Those are the latest news headlines. Still to come, your TalkSport update. But first, here's your weather.
Food and Drink sponsors Talk TV weather.
It will be another dry and sunny afternoon across much of southern and central Britain. Further north, though, we will see cloudy skies and some outbreaks of rain. Taking a look at this evening in more detail, and outbreaks of rain will continue across parts of Scotland, although eastern areas will see some brightness. Northern Ireland and northern England will begin to brighten up as the rain gradually begins to clear away to the east. Elsewhere across England and Wales, the weekend will end on a dry note with plenty of sunshine to finish Sunday. It will also be a rather warm evening for many as temperatures only slowly fall away and most likely still in the low to mid-20s across the south as we approach sunset. Heading towards midnight, much of Scotland will turn drier for a time with plenty of clear skies elsewhere.
Times Food and Drink sponsors Talk TV weather.
Hello again. Eric Ten Hag says it is time for Manchester United to look forward and not reflect on what's gone wrong in recent seasons at Old Trafford. Ten Hag is the 5th permanent boss since Sir Alex Ferguson retired, with only Louis van Gaal and Jose Mourinho winning a trophy. United face Brighton in their first game of the season at 2 p.m, while their rivals and Premier League title holders Manchester City travel to West Ham later. To the Commonwealth Games, and England's 400 metres favourite Matt Hudson-Smith has lost out on a gold medal. Zambia's Muzala Samukonga took the top spot. The 19-year-old made a late break in the final 50 metres to go from 5th to 1st. It's emerged that a hurling player who died during a game on Friday had previously spoken of an issue with his heart. 24-year-old Tipperary player Dylan Quirk received medical attention after collapsing on the pitch, and 2 years ago he revealed he had been diagnosed with myocarditis. All games due to take place in the County Hurling Championships this weekend have been called off after the tragedy. And Team GB's multi-gold medal-winning Paralympic swimmer Ellie Phillips has joined the lineup for this year's Strictly Come Dancing. The 27-year-old says she's bursting with excitement but petrified as she becomes the 6th confirmed contestant for the series, which starts in September. That's all for now. I'll be back with more in half an hour.
Why do you think shouting loudly throughout their interviews is doing any service to people?
99% of the time, I'm actually stood silent. After it's not brilliant. You can shout as much as you like. Yeah.
Welcome back, my friends, to Tice Talk, and good afternoon. I don't quite know where time has gone, but we have flown into the third hour of my programme, except if you're an eco-zealot, in which case we're no longer allowed to fly, but there we are. I enjoy flying. We've cruised into the third hour, and so much going on. That was Howard Cox with us in the studio talking about fuel. It's a good point someone just raised on Twitter that, of course, in many other European countries, they actually charge motorway taxes, tolls on the roads. So is that one of the reasons they can afford lower fuel duty? We can ask Howard that next time he is in. But now we need to go back to this big story about 4 in 10 of the Channel migrants being from Albania. And the question around it is the growth of the Albanian criminal gangs here in the UK, the issue of money laundering and where that's going. Is it that car washers? The suggestion's quite a lot that actually there's a rise in possibly Turkish barbers that is part of the money laundering. And I've actually had one tweet here from Dancing Queen who says, I've now counted 8 barbers in one main road down in Thanet in Kent. And that's several nearby in Ramsgate Town Centre. So is that another route? Well, I'm delighted now to be joined by a senior fellow at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime, based in Tirana. Fabian Ziller knows what there is to know about much of this issue. Fabian, thank you so much for joining us on Tice Talk here on Talk TV. I think your first appearance on the show and the channel. And we've been talking about this big issue, and you understand it. I'm really sort of keen to get your sense. The growth in Albanian criminal gangs here in the UK, what is it about the UK that's causing that growth, or is that growth occurring in other European countries, EU countries?
Thank you, Richard, for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to contribute to this topic, which is sensitive, and I think it's making a problem not only for the British authority and society, but also for Albania. We don't like that the growth and strength of Albanian organized crime to continue and to criminalize further our society. So I think we live in a market demand or market forces times. So if there is demand, always there will be a provider. And unfortunately, the demands of cocaine market, especially where Albanian organized crime is focused in the UK, is large. Just to look at the figures, while the overall cocaine market in Europe is about 10 billion euro, in the UK, this is around 3 or 4 billion pounds. And of course, this increasing demand of this market has pushed Albanian organized crime to invest, to hire, to sophisticate, and to cooperate. And their business model has proved to be successful, unfortunately.
Really? And so we're growing much faster than other EU nations. And is the crime, is it mainly centred around cocaine and cannabis? Is that the sort of your sense? And if so, why?
Yeah, absolutely. Albanian organized crime is investing on cocaine and cannabis growth, especially inside the houses, using, there is a technique that they borrowed from Dutch organized crime and Belgium, and having good control of certain ports, Rotterdam and Amsterdam. Albanian organized crime now have moved up to the ladder of the network of cocaine markets overall, and this has made them exploiting also the low educated Albanians that are moving to the UK to create a very successful network. When I saw the reports, I didn't feel happy at all, because, in Albania we are facing a social crisis in terms of job employment. So the tourism is suffering because we don't have this young age which we need to support the market. So in a sense, is affecting more on social aspect, is affecting Albania, but on the other hand, is also affecting the UK society.
And obviously, we've seen this government report that I exposed, showing this that 4 in 10 of the migrants, are now from Albania. My sort of question there is: are these young men knowingly going to be sort of foot soldiers for some of these gangs, or are they coming here in hope of a better life and being trapped into a sort of modern-day slavery of these gangs without them yet knowing it?
Absolutely. There is, the family in Albania is really strong, and we have a large diaspora now. They're located in the last 15 or 20 years, especially from the north. And they are, some of them have well established, they've opened small businesses. And as there is a demand for labor, they would prefer their family members. But because the visa policy and that is applied in the UK, which I think should be revised, has forced these people to go in the UK for economic reasons. And many of them are following, because now we have what I call a British dream for many Albanian youngsters. So what I mean by British dream, so you go there, you settle really quickly, you don't need to have higher education, you do good money because UK society is generally inclusive. And after some time, you can have a good life.
But of course, I mean, they can already, for example, Fabian, they can come under the seasonal agricultural worker scheme for, to pick fruit and vegetables for months.
Yes, but this, Richard, is not well promoted in Albania.
Right.
And I think this should be revisited. I mean, there are a lot of programs now applied by UK government in the Western Balkans generally, but with focus in Albania, which I think is a positive step. But this will take some years to yield some progress.
Fabian, can we talk about the issue of money laundering? Because obviously, as these gangs are growing, they're generating more profits, more cash. How big is this? And is this what they're doing in car washes and barbers, or actually is it much bigger than that?
I think it's much bigger than that. I mean, if we talk about cocaine market, this is a job for them. I mean, they will not use cash washers or barbershops to launder their process of crime. We're talking about Albanian organized crime is in the most lucrative slice of the drug market share. And we believe that 2/3 of the lords or king lords, drug lords in the UK now are settled outside the UK. We believe they are in Dubai, and much of this cash is transferred through different ways. And there was an arrest of an Emirati citizen I think, 22nd of July, that he alone, using what we call the money mules, have transferred around £1 million. So they are Albanian organized crime now going to the main centers of money laundering, have created established networks with other organized crime groups to...
And could that also be using cryptocurrencies as a way of laundering money?
There is doubt. We believe that cryptocurrency is being used through the dark nets, but we don't have. We are doing some research on that, but we don't think that this is the largest or significant share, because, as I said, they already have some traditional forms of transferring the money outside without any. I mean, for them, this has been successful so far.
Interesting. Fabian, thank you so much indeed for sharing those thoughts with us. We'll keep in touch on this because it's such a big issue and it's not going to stop overnight. That was Fabian Ziller, the Senior Fellow at Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime, with his thoughts on the growth in that crime. It's really significant. It's the greatest here in the UK. We've just got time to go to North Wales, where Anne's on the line. Hi, Anne.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you?
Fine, thanks, fine. What would you quickly like to say?
Yeah, all I want to say basically is that, you know, as a family act, something that we're talking about most days, about the numbers of illegal immigrants coming over all over the news. We obviously it's something really, really bad is going on. I actually think that they're quietly building armies, and what they want to do is actually turn on the people of the United Kingdom and, you know, start wars.
Well, yeah, I think that's. I hear your view. I'm not of that view. My view is that it's all about the money, and that these organised gangs are trapping people into modern-day slavery, and they're making fortunes off them. And these drug cartels, they're very violent, very dangerous, and as Fabian was just saying, there's so much money in it.
Yes, yeah, you know, I'm sure that is going on as well, and I agree with you there as well. But I do think that we don't know, you know, the background of all of these people generally. As you said earlier on, that they're actually paying more to come in, where if they actually come into the country legally, it would be a lot cheaper for them legally, but they're actually entering illegally, which obviously proves that something... that they're wanting to hide from.
That's the point, and that's what's so significant about this expose, is you have to ask the question, why are they paying more when they could pay less in a much safer way to come here lawfully?
Yes, yeah, you know, absolutely, and I completely agree with you there, Richard. You know, your points are quite obvious, and I'm sure... you know, I really hope that today that the government, the likes of Liz Truss...
Well, that's what I'm hoping, Anne, is that someone's going to rock up to one of their hustings, a Conservative Party member who's listening to this show, and going to ask them that very question. And thank you so much for that from North Wales. We're going to take a quick break and then take more of your calls. It's Tice Talk, it's Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to Tice Talk. We have still got about 40 minutes or so before the great Trisha Goddard is on at 1 till 4. And then, yes, folks, he's back at 4 o'clock to entertain you. The never optimistic, well, actually, he's always optimistic, but the noisy, the brilliant Kevin O'Sullivan is on at 4 till 7. And then it's Saggers to talk about the first weekend of the Premier League football season starting this weekend. He is on at 7. We've got lots of messages, lots of calls still coming in. We're heading back up to Newcastle, where John is on the line. Good afternoon, John.
Hello, Richard. My point is about illegal immigrants, which the Conservative government have failed to put right. Illegal immigrants, Albanians coming to this country, being given a special offer, Nigel Farage tells us, from £4,500 to £3,500. Getting across the water, halfway across the channel, they're picked up by Border Force, who brings them the rest of the way here. Two options. One option for illegal immigrants coming here surely is putting them in more hotels, 3 square meals a day, £38 spending money, as Nigel Farage would tell us. And then the other option would be for, you know, to build up around the country buildings so we can put them in and give them hard labour. Hard labour.
Of course, the thing is, though, John, it takes. I mean, the reality is the accommodation takes time to build, which is why they've been put in hotels, and the government have just completely failed to appreciate the quantity that we're talking about.
Yes, this is totally true. It's just disgusting. And I've been to France on holiday and I have to provide a passport. And these people are just coming across willy-nilly by the thousands, and it mustn't be doing our economy any good whatsoever. And if they cannot stop it, there is one way, possibly, and that is hard labour. If somebody tells you that when you get across the channel, wherever, and you're going to be given hard labour for the rest of your time...
Yeah, the issue there is, John, then that'll be against human rights laws, because there'll be the issue of paying people, and therefore, of course, in a sense, that actually will potentially... that'll end up with attracting even more people. You know, many people are not afraid of good hard work in return for being paid for. That could act as an attraction rather than a deterrent, John.
Well, the point, you know, what about the human rights of the British people?
Well, there you are. That's exactly right. That's why we've got to withdraw from the ECHR. Great call, John. Thank you very much. Keep listening. We're going to head back south from Newcastle down to Bedfordshire, where Andrew's on the line. Hi, Andrew.
Hi.
Hi, good afternoon. What's on your mind?
Well, lots of people are talking about energy, and a year ago I decided to buy a Tesla and have a private company put panels on my roof.
Right.
And I was gas and electricity in, but when I heard about this, I got a bill I'm on a smart meter, supposedly.
Yes.
And I got a bill for over £600 for 6 days of gas.
What?
I rang them up and I said, look, what's going on here? You know, because I was on direct debit and they would have taken that from me.
Wow. So that meter wasn't very smart.
Beforehand, and I said, look, something's wrong here. Sorry, take that rotten gas meter out and I'll just rely on electricity, which I'm producing quite a lot.
Right, from your panels?
The fact that, pardon?
From your panels?
Yeah, I've got 20 on the roof.
Fantastic.
But the thing is that more people, I spoke to Tesla owners, and they won't get into the panels on the roof or a power wall like from Tesla, because of the rates that are reimbursing them for what they're producing on their roofs, like me.
Yes, that's right. So that rate...
only giving me, the best I've got is from Octopus, which was 7.5p. But in the winter, they're going to be charging me 40p.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right on this, Andrew. I'm glad you raised it. Someone raised it last weekend, and actually I didn't get back. But the key thing there is, I think there is a real scam here. They're charging, as you say, 40p. They're only paying people, domestic generators, 7p, but I'm doing it commercially with lots of panels on industrial buildings. I'm now being offered 28p for green energy. So it feels that there's yet another rip-off from the companies.
Right, so should I...
You should be saying to your people, why are you only getting 7p when you're offering in the 20s to commercial generators?
What do you have to be a commercial? I suppose it's...
Well, it's just a question of quantum, but it just feels to me that it's not fair. You know, people are... the government's trying to encourage people to generate more solar power and things, but
no,
then...
they're not. They're not encouraging people at all, because they must know what's going on.
That may not exist. Andrew, we'll keep on that. I think I need to investigate why domestic consumers and generators are being ripped off. Thank you, Andrew. We're going to quickly head to Basingstoke, where Simon is there. Hi, Simon.
Hi, Richard. Just on the illegal immigration issue, one of the big areas that's not considered is visa overstayers. There have been 3 Home Office projects to monitor people who enter and exit the country. All the IT systems eventually failed the test. And so we have no mechanism in this country to identify visa overstayers. So you could literally just say, oh, I'm going for 30 days on a visitor's visa, overstay, and nothing will ever happen to you.
I mean, I'm sort of hoping that can't be the case, but you've obviously got some information that tells you that is the case.
Well, I worked on I worked at Equifax, started off in anti-money laundering, which your earlier caller was talking about. This country is a mecca for it.
Yes.
Because our Financial Conduct Authority has no interest in dealing with this issue because it's far too lucrative for the economy as a whole. But I also was involved in the National ID Card project, and that was one of the things that was discussed during that. And the fact that if we had a national ID card, then this would reveal a large number of people who've overstayed their visas, and then what happens next? How are you going to deal with that as an issue?
Yeah, I don't like the idea of national ID cards.
Under the Labour government, so this is an ongoing issue. It's also one of the largest sources of illegal immigration in the United States, which does have a monitoring system. They just don't apply it.
That's right. Great call, Simon. Thank you so much for that. Simon in Basingstoke worried about visa overstayers. We've quickly got time for Andre in Wiltshire. 45 seconds, Andre.
Hello, Dave. Yeah, I'm with the guy that was just on the call. The whole thing about immigration is the Home Office has failed miserably for 3 years. Now, in the private sector, if you fail, you get the sack.
That was I mean, it's just not good enough, is it?
It's not good enough. I mean, they're getting paid vast sums of money to being in the government, and their dereliction of duty is unspeakable.
Unspeakable, Andre. You are so right. Thank you. Keep listening. Keep calling. Lots of people very unhappy there, although apparently I've upset someone else who says that I've just cut someone off. The Home of Free Speech has just sent one call twice in the duration of the call. Not quite sure about that, but anyway, stay with us. Lots coming up. The Great Barrier Reef. Good news, folks. Stay with us. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV.
I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is Talk TV. I think my most memorable and proudest moment in journalism over all these years is actually being on air during the lockdowns, even when I had COVID myself. Over the last 2 years, getting people to tell their stories, not just about people who lost loved ones to COVID, but people who lost their fundamental freedoms, their children's schooling, their mental health, their physical health, their businesses, and giving people a chance to tell their stories about how it affected them.
This is Talk TV News.
Good afternoon. A 5th man has been arrested in connection with the disappearance of student nurse Owami Davis after detectives renewed their appeal for information. It's exactly a month since the 24-year-old woman from Essex was last seen in South London on the 7th of July. 2 people have been arrested on suspicion of murder and 3 on suspicion of kidnap. Liz Truss has pledged to immediately reverse the rise in national insurance contributions if she becomes Prime Minister. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, the Tory leadership candidate has pledged to bring in an emergency budget to grow the economy. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak wants to introduce another multi-billion-pound package to help families struggling with the rising cost of living. The former Chancellor says his Tory leadership rival Liz Truss was wrong to rule out further direct support for households this winter. Sunak's supporter Damien Hines says her proposed tax cuts were not the answer.
And the problem with having unfunded tax cuts, which means borrowing more, which means interest rates going up, is you can make inflation worse. The inflation we've got right now is because of what are called supply-side problems to do with COVID, issues on supply chains and Putin's brutality in Ukraine. What we mustn't do is make that become kind of self-fulfilling.
And it's come to light that before her tragic death, Dame Deborah James told her children to marry only for love. In a final letter she wrote to them and her husband. In an extract shared exclusively with The Sun, the inspirational cancer campaigner and podcast host opened up on how to stay positive in the face of adversity, calling her husband Sebastian the love of her life. She died in June after a long battle with bowel cancer. That's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back, my friends, to the last half hour of Tice Talk. Now, we need some clarity and some clarification because, just to be clear, we weren't censoring any free speech there, but it is a family show, so we try and avoid swear words. So my wonderful production team, they just had to cut out a couple of swear words, which was the reason you may have heard a little bang. We weren't censoring free speech. We were just trying to keep the language clean and as pure as we can, even despite our frustrations. But I have great news, yes. I always like to talk about a bit of climate sanity, and I have good news. And it's nice to share the good news in the latter part of the show, because the Great Barrier Reef has been recovering remarkably, wonderfully with coral cover to the point where it's now at record levels. This is just 5 years after headlines all over the world, encouraged by the likes of the BBC, that said in 2017, the Great Barrier Reef is damaged beyond repair and can no longer be saved, said the experts, said the scientists, said the consensus of them. Think about that, folks. Very often, when there's a consensus of scientific opinion, if you think the opposite, you may well be nearer the truth. And I'm delighted to be joined now, live from Australia, by Dr. Peter Ridd, who is a physicist, a geophysicist no less, and an oceanographer. I can't say that, so I'm not going to try again. Oceanographer, thank you, Aaron, and an inventor. Goodness me, I must be getting tired. Anyway, who's with me on the line? Peter, thank you so much. You've been studying the Great Barrier Reef, I read, since 1984. So I'm guessing that you know more than almost anybody. I mean, you wrote a report for the Global Warming Policy Foundation, and this all sounds great news. Please do share it with my lovely listeners. But why is it that some people haven't been reporting on this great news?
Exactly. Why hasn't the BBC been really broadcasting the fabulous news, which is that we're at record high coral cover? It's never been better since records began in the 1980s. And all the news about bleaching over the last few years, where they've said we've lost 93% of the coral. And remember, coral takes, a decade to recover. We're now at record high coral cover. So the likes of the BBC have been saying things like, oh, yes, it's at record high coral cover, but it's only the sort of the plate and the staghorn coral that's recovered, and somehow that's bad that we've got all this beautiful coral now.
Just remarkable, Peter. We've actually got one of the graphs from your report, and if anybody wants to read this report, you'll find it on the Global Warming Policy Foundation. It's wonderful reading with some lovely pictures, but there's a graph showing the extent there since I think 1986 or something, how that is now the highest percentage of coral cover since records began.
That's right. And you see that low point, that was in about 2010, and that wasn't coral bleaching or any of those sorts of things. We had a devastating cyclone that just tracked straight down the Great Barrier Reef, which, by the way, is about as big as Germany, so it's a big thing. And we lost a lot of coral. And then since then, it's just been recovering and recovering. And with all those bad news about bleaching and all the rest of it, made almost no difference. And now we're at record high coral cover. So ring the church bells, give the kids a day off school. The Earth is not ending.
But Peter, I just must need to clarify this, because the BBC, they tell me that although the Great Barrier Reef sees record coral cover, it is still highly vulnerable. Is that them just being a bit being unable to celebrate, unabashed good news?
It's just desperation. So that drop in the graph there from the cyclone, because the big waves from the cyclone smash all the delicate coral. These are the really beautiful ones with all the fish. And so that when we lost all those delicate coral, they said, oh, well, it's never going to recover again. And now we've got all this coral. They can't exactly say we're wrong. It's just that, well, sometime in the distant future, presumably it's going to die, even though there's no data to suggest that's going to happen. Look, the Great Barrier Reef is absolutely beautiful. People from England and United Kingdom should come to it and see for yourself.
You are so right. I'm lucky enough to have been. Peter, you're a great tour guide, that is sure. But tell me about this slightly strange thing that went on with the Australian Institute of Marine Science, who didn't want to publish some of the emerging positive data. What's gone on there?
Well, the Australian Institute of Marine Science has done a very good job collecting this data. It's a huge job to collect it. But one of the things they haven't done since 2016, halfway up the good news, was actually add up all the numbers to get the sort of the final graph for the whole Great Barrier Reef. So it tends to hide the really, really good news that we've got there. On the other hand, the Australian Institute of Marine Science is probably the best of the science institutions. There's a terrible amount of untrustworthiness in most of the environmental science institutions, not only in this country, but all over the world, with ideology.
So in a sense, they're doing a good job, but it's sort of, they can't be seen to celebrate good news too much. Is that partly because they're worried about losing funding, do you think?
I wouldn't accuse them of that, actually, but there's certainly some institutions where there's that problem. There's a whole lot of groupthink in the institutions, so they all get together and get worried about the reef, and they exclude people like myself who have been, belling the cat for quite a long time now. And there's a bit of sort of good cause corruption, that they know what the good thing to do is, and that is just to reduce carbon emissions. All right, that's supposedly the good thing to do. And they'll sometimes bend the truth to do that. Now, I'm not saying that AIMS has done that, not in this case, but some of the other institutions have undoubtedly done that.
Without question. And I think that, it's just fascinating, the BBC unable to celebrate that good news. And the fact that just 5 years ago they said it was beyond repair, all these, the consensus of scientific thinking. How wrong could they be?
Well, exactly. This is just complete proof that those institutions have been utterly untrustworthy. And this is why I've been asking for some quality assurance, because this is actually a quality assurance. If you're an industrial man, Richard, then you know about quality assurance. You've got to get these things right. And we're getting things terribly wrong. But it's not just the BBC, the ABC, and of course the scientific institutions and the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority have all been saying that the reef is doomed, that the coral has been halved, that we've lost 93% of the coral. And this has proven utterly, utterly how untrustworthy they have been.
Peter, absolutely fantastic news to celebrate, really, and I think it's wonderful. And thank you so much for all you're doing. Keep up the good work. And keep sharing it with us. I really do appreciate that. That's Dr. Peter Ridd, all the way from Australia, folks. This is a global show. We get the best, the brightest, and the most positive people. Peter is a geophysicist and an oceanographer. I said that right that time. Thank you for that practice. Share your thoughts, and we've got one from Andy who says that scientists seem to get sucked into groupthink these days to protect their own standing and funding, and that is a problem. That very often, in order for scientists to get the funding, they have to go down what is the accepted route. what is the groupthink route, and it's really challenging if you try and oppose that. Anyway, stay with us. We'll take your calls before Tricia at 1 o'clock. It's Tice Talk. It is Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to the last section of my 3-hour show before Tricia's on at once. Lots of very kind tweets and things. Julie says, well, the truth comes out big time on Tice Talk, Talk TV, everything today, legal immigration, the environment, and the good news about the Great Barrier Reef. And someone else congratulated me on my first year and hoping I make a full second year. I do too, because it's important to give people the truth, whether it's good news or bad news. I like celebrating good news. There's not enough of it. We're going to head down to Maidstone, where Rosemary is on the line. Good afternoon, Rosemary.
Good afternoon, Richard.
How are you? What's on your mind?
Well, lots of things, nearly everything you've been speaking about, but, you know, we haven't got time. What I do want to point out is carbon dioxide is essential for plants. It's a fertiliser for plants.
It is. It's a natural fertiliser, isn't it?
They take in and they give us beautiful oxygen to breathe. Carbon monoxide is the dangerous one. But can someone please explain to me how they are capturing carbon dioxide and storing it? Because I've heard that's what they want to do, and they sell it. And are we being taken for fools? Because I just don't understand what they're on about. I've got a brain that's too sensible, I think. I don't see how it can be stored, but this is what we've been told. But when they're talking about gases, which gases are they talking about as being dangerous? because many of them are needed.
You're
all these, there's so many gases.
You're so right. We need them, Rosemary. Rosemary, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to cut you off because we were trying to get John Redwood on the line. We missed him earlier. I do want to just quickly catch him for 5 minutes. But, Rosemary, thank you very much for that call. Hopefully, I can go now to John Redwood, the Conservative MP for Wokingham. Good afternoon, John.
Hello.
Great to have you with us. I just wanted to catch up your thoughts because you're closer to this than most about the Bank of England's pretty extraordinarily bearish statement on in the last few days, raising the interest rates and worrying about another 5 quarters of recession. Just really wanted your quick view on that, John.
Well, they're right to concern us that the economy is deteriorating at pace and that we are going into a sharp slowdown. They're helping do that because they've had to adjust their money policy from far too lax and inflationary last year to very tough this year to try and sort things out. And they're right to point out that the huge increase in energy prices now coming through and hitting us harder this autumn is also going to slow everything down. But it's up to the government to respond and to show that it can take measures to start to offset that, because we don't want the high inflation to be followed by too deep a recession.
That's right. I mean, I'm 57. I can't recall such an anxious, gloomy prediction from the Bank of England as that. I must say, I was presenting at the time. I nearly sort of fell off my chair. To what extent do you think that are they sort of managing market expectations, managing people's expectations to be really careful with our money?
I think there's a bit of that. I think having got behind the curve on inflation and being surprised on the upside, they've now probably lurched too far the other way. And part of it is to get people to understand the seriousness of the economic position we're in, to take the last inflationary heat out of the economy going into the new year. Obviously, there's still going to be quite a lot of pent-up inflation coming through this autumn, unfortunately. Partly because we chose to delay the price rises on energy having their full impact.
Yes.
But I hope that the government will see, and certainly Liz Truss, the candidate I favour for Prime Minister, sees that we need to give a bit of money back to people right now because too much money is being taken out of people's pockets. The Bank of England are hitting those with flexible rate mortgages. The energy prices is hitting anybody with a gas boiler or with a car to run. It's just too big a hit, and if we don't do anything, the bank will be right. We'll have a nasty recession.
Well, that's right. Well, John, you have many fans on my show, and indeed, one of them has just tweeted in again for the second time. At last, the legend that is Sir John Redwood is on the show. That's some good news for you. People are hoping that you might get a job in Liz Truss's government if she wins. How quickly do you think... do you think that an emergency budget they could do really within a matter of a couple of weeks in order to make these essential changes that I think are needed to try and stave off this recession?
Yes, I think it's got to be done at pace, and I think Liz Truss, from her public statements, very clear she thinks it's got to be done at pace, but whoever is given the job of Chancellor will need to talk it through with the Treasury officials and the Bank of England officials and get all the necessary pieces of information in place so that it's not badly done, so that it won't be immediate, but it has to have a great sense of urgency, and I'm sure that will be delivered if Liz is indeed the Prime Minister. She's made that the main correct theme of her campaign.
And I guess, on the one sense, if the Bank of England is raising interest rates, because that's really its only lever to control inflation, but on the other side, if a Truss government reduces taxes on consumer goods, mathematically that's reducing inflation, and that's helpful.
Well, of course it's helpful. I mean, as I keep saying, if you take some of the taxes off energy, and again, Liz Truss wants to take the special green taxes off energy, at least temporarily, you make two things happen. You give people a bit more money to pay the very large bills, so the hit to output is not as big, and you get an immediate benefit in the published inflation rate. So what's not to like about all that? But I think there's one other thing I'd point out, and that is Bank of England has two clubs to play this round of golf, not just one, and the main one they've been using, which gave us the inflation, was printing an awful lot of money and buying up a lot of state debt to keep the interest rates down on the state debt. And they've done a very big switch on that, which the media really hasn't picked up on. And whereas last year they were creating 150 billion to put into state debt, this year now they're talking about going forward actually reducing money in the state debt they own by 80 billion. So there's a 230 billion swing in money policy, which nobody really seems to want to talk about. And I think that's quite enough to bring the inflation down next year. And it means we do need to think about how deep the recession will be on the back of it all.
Well, you and I have talked before that we have to grow our way out of this crisis. You can't tax your way out of a crisis. People are desperately worried about their energy bills. You've touched on the green levies tax. But, I mean, some of the analysts now, John, are forecasting the bills, the cap might be in October or January as high as £3,500 or £4,000. In which case, that's not going to be enough. Further action is going to be required, isn't it?
I think there would need to be further action, and the incoming Prime Minister and Chancellor have to sit down and decide when and how much is affordable and offer some reassurance, as indeed Liz's programme of national insurance reduction and green levies offers some reassurance. Remember that in the next few weeks, when we start to get the bad news of the delayed energy price rises, there is an offset from the outgoing government's package, which is helpful. So we're now thinking about what you need to do for later in the winter, when the benefit of the universal £400 going to households and the up to £1,200 for the poorer households has worked through the system. So there's a little bit of time, but it needs to be reviewed again. And I think it's perfectly sensible to do it by lowering taxes which lower the cost of energy. That has a double advantage.
Yes, and essentially people have to make their own decisions, but more help is going to be needed. I think it's very serious. John, good luck. I hope that you are, if it is a trust government, then I hope that you do get some senior role, because you are a voice of economic common sense within the Conservative front benches or back benches. Thank you so much, John Redwood, Tory MP for Wokingham, with his thoughts there. He may be coming back, and that would be a good thing for our country, John Redwood MP. And we've just got time for a call from Craig in West Yorkshire. Hi, Craig.
Hello, good morning. Oh, good afternoon, Richard.
Good afternoon. I'm all right. It's been a busy show. What's on your mind?
It has. Yeah, it's just regarding the caller you had on earlier talking about solar panels and the cost of consumption versus what you get paid for production, and what I think you might want to do as political parties pursue a policy of what's called net metering. So you get paid exactly the same for production as you do for consumption. And they do that in a number of countries around the world. And would you believe it, they do it in many states in America. So
really? Because there's a slight sort of gap in the middle for transmission costs and sort of administration, but it doesn't need to be that much, does it, Craig?
Well, it could be even 90%, yes, to allow some spread for some profiteering by the electric companies. But I think it should be done, and it would mean the cost of a solar system being installed in a household reducing by about 50% if you don't need to install batteries, because what people are encouraged to do now, because the feed-in tariffs are so low, is buy batteries, and they cost an absolute fortune, and they're bad for the environment because they don't last forever.
It's an outrage, and it's another rip-off. Have you got solar panels, Craig, or have you looked at it?
No, I'm thinking of it. I've kind of teamed up with a pal who's got them, and he's very happy. I'm looking at the same company. My roof, unfortunately, isn't optimally arranged. It's more east-west facing, so it's a bit more complex. I am thinking of it. And it would be a system with a battery for storage and because there's no point, feeding in the excess electricity.
There's no point down at that level, but there should be a much higher tariff. Commercial generators, I'm being offered 28p because I'm above a certain size, but I think domestic consumers should be encouraged as well.
And they should, and what also should be outlawed is the cost that you have to pay for the application to install a system of a certain size, because that kind of eats up the first year's worth of savings on the solar system. It's just ridiculous profiteering by the electricity companies.
Great call, Craig. Thank you so much from West Yorkshire with his thoughts. We all want to do our bit, folks, but we don't like being ripped off. We don't like being, basically, sold down the river and, as I say, being ripped off. But it's been a fantastic show, but there's more to come because at 1 o'clock now, basically, the wonderful Trisha Goddard is going to take you through the next 3 hours and is on the line from Connecticut, looking ebullient, radiant. Trisha, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm just getting. I've got off my walking frame, as you know. I had that awful accident.
I know you had a terrible accident.
I'm here.
You're here. Are you in one piece?
Well, several pieces. Happy 1 year. Happy 1 year to you.
Thank you very much.
We've got a great show coming up with our faith panel. We're asking to smack or not to smack, spare the rod and spoil the child, true or not. It's going to be a really interesting debate, that one. We've got Doctor in the House looking at all things medical that have made headlines this week. And after the BBC has been criticised for not adequately reflecting people in rural areas, we have got not one, not two, but 3 stories of real significance, because we forget about our rural areas.
Absolutely.
We forget about our farmers and our food producers. So I like having a look in the place